Hello, what's up? Good evening, and welcome to the movie discussion Pocket Dimension, where time does not exist and the only thing that matters is film. I'm Cole, as always, joined by Jay. We're a bit late coming to you tonight, but we are back in our regular Tuesday night time slot, which we hope we can inhabit for the next little while, or at least have some consistency going forward, not missing weeks after a lot of April and May being taken off due to various circumstances. So we return to you now after finally concluding our what was supposed to be, I mean, if you put it all together, fairly short series on Orson Welles to move on to new things. Although we are returning to a filmmaker that we have done before on this show, although it was about 2 years ago now, and that is the American animator Ralph Bakshi. Previously, he'd done his 1977 fantasy sci-fi film Wizards, which is a film that I've always had like weird mixed feelings on. And we'll probably repeat some stuff we said in that episode, just talking about him and his career in general. But the one thing I just cannot overemphasize or overstate about Bakshi is that, like, of all the sort of known filmmakers out there, he's easily the one I feel the most conflicted about. Because on the one hand, of course, I'm a big fan of animation, and I really love the medium, and this is a guy that championed it and was also very helpful in, breaking down some of the barriers that we have, particularly in the West. As a Western animator, we often talk about the animation age ghetto and how, while in other places, like most notably Japan, animation was always very taken very seriously as a medium and used for all sorts of different sorts of genres and stuff because of the success of Disney and then branching out into other sorts of cartoons throughout, say, the 50s and 60s, and the use of limited animation. Animation for decades, including right up to now, 2019 people. In the West, people will still see it as sort of like a medium that's supposed to be like limited to more simple stuff for children, or at least more wholesome stuff for children. And Ralph Bakshi is one of the guys that helped sort of break down some of those barriers with his more adult fare, starting, of course, with a very famous adult movie, Fritz the Cat, which is not Bakshi's own creation. That's Robert Crumb, a cartoon part of the underground comics movements of the 70s, which, of course, in its turn was part of the whole thing of elevating the medium of comics beyond something that was just simple and for kids. Could also be graphic and serious, or sleazy in the case of something like that, R-rated, X-rated, etc. The movie itself actually got an X-rated, which Bakshi was never very satisfied with because he wanted more people to see it, and of course he didn't think it was really that bad. So that was his
Wow.
first movie, and then he
That
would
was
go on to
X-rated.
have
That's terrible.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
tame, man.
But this is like 1970, right?
Yeah.
So this is 1970, and the only animation that people are really aware of at this point are, again, the big Disney movies, and then maybe some of the shorter cartoons that existed, Super Friends and Warner Brothers cartoons. So this was something else entirely, and which a lot of people thought was very immoral and terrible, considering to them animation was only supposed to be aimed at children, and the idea of having animation that was adults only was somehow wrong or perverted. I don't know, etc. So anyway, my point is, I admire Bakshi for a lot of reasons, and again, I think he is a truly talented guy. And he also fought for pretty much everything he's gotten in his career. He always had to fight. He never really had a lot of great support or budgets, so he really had to fight to get his stuff done. And really, that shows a career that's marred by, I don't want to say inconsistency exactly, but I feel like pretty much all the movies I've seen by him, none of them quite are that great at what they maybe could have been. I think they were always held back by certain circumstances. People maybe that aren't as familiar with his career or just animation in general might at least remember the 1992 film Cool World, which was part live action, part animation, and it's remembered as quite a debacle and basically not a very good movie and a box office flop. And that's probably the best example, but I think almost all his movies, I don't know if any of them really reach their potential or exactly what he foresaw. So I feel the same way, like, movie to movie, as I do about his career. Like, I feel like he had good ideas and he had talent, but it didn't always get to come together, which wasn't always his fault. There's often other forces at work, some beyond his control. And so we're kind of right in the middle of his career here with 1983's Fire and Ice, which is about sort of as simple and straightforward a movie that he's done goes. It's a very simple swords and sorcery type movie, which at the time was I think got a green light because it was seen as something that was somewhat bankable at the time. You're coming off the first ever live action Conan movie, which was fairly successful with Arnold Schwarzenegger. The movie Beastmaster was around this time, and just some other sci-fi in general. 82 was the year of one of my favorite fantasy films, The Dark Crystal. The 80s, we've often talked about, was a really great time for fantasy, so it makes perfect sense this came out when it did. So this is very much kind of like a Conan story, but without Conan. It's that kind of fantasy, the sort of barbarian loincloth fantasy. And the movie is very much sort of like a tribute to, and of course, using the art of one of the most famous artists in fantasy, Frank Frazetta. And Frazetta, of course, did work on the film and was, I guess, the principal sort of character designer and stuff like that. So very much, in some ways, this is like seeing Frank Frazetta's art come to life. And he might not have originated, the big-titted warrior woman type thing, but he perfected it. He popularized it. Frazetta himself was sort of a contemporary of Bakshi. They're both from like the same generation. I think he's maybe about 10 years older. I think actually, I think he might have been born in 28 or 29, something like that. Bakshi being from 38. So anyway, they weren't too far off from each other, and they both worked in the golden age of comics and animation and did various contributions there. Frazetta got because of the style of his art. Frazetta got more well known for his covers than really, interior comic art, and that almost became his career. In the 60s, he got kind of discovered, I think, by United Artists to do movie posters, and it sort of opened up a whole new career for him, where he do movie posters, album covers, and the covers of various novels. He did stuff like. I think there were some Conan novels. Also, the Edgar Rice Burroughs stuff like Tarzan novels and his other novels, which were the John Carter ones, The Princess of Mars. He did a bunch of those. So yeah, whenever you think of sort of that pulpy 50s, 60s fantasy type look, a lot of it was Frank Frazetta, and a lot of it that wasn't was probably directly inspired by him. So by the 70s, he was very well known and doing quite well. I think he was very successful, and to this day, a lot of his art sells very high prices. He was very, very well acclaimed, especially for some of like his big oil paintings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of too bad this movie is really the only thing that takes his character designs directly anyway. Lots of stuff is inspired by, but this is coming directly from him, because the movie itself is not very special or memorable, and unlike it often was the case with Bakshi's films, it didn't have like a massive budget or anything like that, so you can really see how, like a lot of his movies, sometimes it looks really good and other times it looks really cheap. You'll have moments that look very artistic and nice, and then you'll have moments that look like the cheapest Saturday morning cartoon of the era. So, and they never really got great talent either. I've never seen yet any of his movies have like decent voice acting. The voice acting is always very bland and disappointing. Often you'll even have voices that don't really match the characters too well. This movie's not terrible for that. There are worse examples, but again, it's bland. There's not really any memorable performance, and was sort of the one of the calling cards of his career. This made use of rotoscoping, which is the idea of taking a live action actor and having them move around, and then tracing animation cells on top of it to mimic the movements. I'm sure at the time it was seen as pretty cutting edge, but nowadays it seems as sort of like a weird, antiquated way of doing things. And honestly, if you think, well, maybe this gives the idea of like, instead of an animator having to imitate like human movement, they get real human movement and then just animate it. But I don't know. The movements in it don't look that great to me. Sometimes it looks pretty herky-jerky, particularly when our hero runs. He runs a few times in this movie, and it doesn't look natural or good at all. It looks quite silly. So I don't know if that comes down to the physical actor performer or what. So for most of these characters, they were acted by somebody physically and then a voice. But in a couple examples, there actually were the actor was played by both. In the case of the character Dark Wolf, he was done. The performance model and voice actor were the same person.
Oh, okay.
Same thing with the King Jor-El or Gerald or whatever you want to say. Jor-El's probably too close to Superman. Also, the characters Manga and Paco. So there were several characters that actually had the same voice actor as a physical performer. But this is, like we said, this is part of like the Conan sort of wave of fantasy. the last episode we did when I went on a little bit of spiel about the different kinds of fantasy and how I was thinking about that. This falls in sort of what you would call the end of low fantasy. So what's the difference between like a high fantasy and low fantasy? Well, high fantasy is very epic. The stakes are usually like, can't be higher. It's like the world is in peril. And also you have stuff like magic and stuff is very much in your face. And with low fantasy, it's usually more localized, as it is with a lot of the Conan stuff. A lot of the Conan stuff, it wasn't just necessarily, it was never really a quest to save the world. It was usually a quest to do this or that. Magic exists, but there's not as much of it. And also, I don't know if this is exactly following the rules, but I've noticed that also, you'll notice the level of technology is different. Like a lot of high fantasy sort of fits with sort of like middle to late Middle Ages. You've got, say, like knights with plate armor. You've got more high-tech sorts of weaponry like crossbows and longbows, that kind of stuff. Whereas this is a world that is very, if you were trying to give it like a historical parallel, would be like, I don't know, Bronze Age practically. It's a very low-tech world, well before armor, well before more sophisticated weaponry and forms of warfare. It's almost like a world where man is just sort of basically scraping out survival against a very sinister backdrop, often populated with like monsters and very dangerous animals, which pops up a lot in this movie. So that's the other thing that's going on here. This is more on the low end. This is more low fantasy. When you're talking about swords and sorcery, you're not going to see big castles or big bustling towns or wizards markets or schools or anything like that. It's very much a kingdom here and there, kind of isolated in small villages, and as we've seen, basically barbarian type of characters. I mean, nobody in this movie wears any clothes. Everybody's wearing thongs and loincloths, which again, it's just very much the strength of Rosetta's style. And that's another thing where the movie can't be really taken too seriously, because it's kind of it's kind of like watching, say, the heavy metal movie. It's got some TNA appeal, I suppose, that maybe a 12-year-old might like. And I'm not saying you have to be 12. I'm sure the characters are attractive, but I just mean there's not very much to really take away from the movie, almost besides that. Like it's a pretty standard plot with a not very great world with pretty bland characters. So the sex angle is really something that makes it stand out a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't hurt it. I don't think it's just it kind of loses its luster rather quickly. I think.
Yeah, I think so.
It's typical of Frazetta's style.
Sure, and it works for Bakshi too. He likes that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at the actress that did the. Was used for the rotoscoping, and she's not quite as well endowed.
Yeah, not quite as buxom.
Yeah, and she doesn't have a Kim Kardashian ass either.
All right, don't worry, we'll animate that in.
Yeah.
We'll get all the bouncing and jiggles.
Which, I mean, that stuff was well done. I thought, a lot of the animation I really did enjoy. That was probably one of my favorite things about the film.
Well, this is one of the Bakshi films where I think the character designs are actually fairly strong.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the times I've been upset with the character designs, or at least underwhelmed by them, where they look kind of half-assed or like they didn't really put much effort into it. Jan was saying before the show, of course, his big foray into fantasy besides Wizards is that he actually did do, I'm sure, a somewhat infamous animated adaptation of The Lord of the Rings, which I was saying is kind of like sums up how I feel about Bakshi as a whole, again, where I'm very conflicted, where there's a lot of things I admire and like, but then there's a lot of things that I don't think are very good and, don't bother me, upset me exactly, but they can in the context of Lord of the Rings, because I hate the character designs in that so much. I hate them. Like, it's the ruination of those characters, like seeing people like Legolas and Frodo and Aragorn, like they all look so shitty. They're so terrible. I'm gonna watch it again soon because I'm a masochist and I'm also somewhat curious because there's some stuff I forget. But this movie, while you wouldn't say the character designs are exactly beautiful, they're all good and they all sort of have a uniform look to them, which I mean helps, because I've also felt in some of his other films too that it's not necessarily uniform. Like sometimes some characters look pretty good and some look pretty bad. Is kind of how I felt like with something like Wizards. This movie, I feel like it's more consistent, so that helps it too. As far as the world we're given, it's again sort of a standard low fantasy type world, just like I described. Scattered, isolated kingdoms, fairly low tech, low magic. There is a big bad in this, which is like some sort of evil sorceress that has a son that becomes like an evil wizard, I guess. His name is Necron. Not very imaginative there. And the whole fire and ice theme comes from them being like from the north, controlling like glaciers. They're from the world of ice, and they want to expand their empire to the worlds of south, which is fire. So it's ice coming down to meet fire. Whoop-de-doo. Okay, sure. I mean, that's all over fantasy, as people know. Game of Thrones is actually from a larger series called A Song of Ice and Fire. But that's a lot more subtle. That's a lot. The ice and fire in that is a lot more subtle than this, where you literally have ice and fire going. The glaciers coming down.
So this is low fantasy. You said. Is that what you said? This is considered low.
It's what I call low fantasy, very much which was introduced with the Conan stuff.
Conan and like Beastmaster would be as well.
I think so. I barely remember that, but yeah.
I mean, I think there is a little bit of magic in Beastmaster, but
again, there's magic. It's just it's more rare. Like only certain characters have it, or sometimes kind of like what they did with like the Game of Thrones stuff, where it's like there's magic, but it's from a long time ago, and and now people don't even really believe in it anymore. But there's little pockets of it here and there, and that's kind of what's going on here. Like the only magic user we see is the main bad guy. And they make it seem like there aren't really any other sort of wizards about that could take him on.
That was a confusing part to me because the film opens with Necron. I mean, essentially like having seizures, and then there's glaciers popping up all over the place. You don't know what the hell is going on.
Yeah, his powers are not well defined. A lot of stuff in this world is not well defined. Again, it's only an 80-minute runtime.
Yeah.
And speaking of like a lot of Bakshi's films not having great budgets, don't you just love the opening narration, which is at first written out, but then they don't write the rest of it, then they just pick up. And also, over this narration, what we get is basically principal, like, sketch art. Stuff that the very preliminary stuff you do for any movie is like sketch stuff. They decide to put this right at the start. Like, I'm not saying they're bad sketches. I'm just saying it seems a little weird to put that in your finished movie.
Is it when it was, like, the actual actors were used?
I don't know. It's just such an underwhelming opening. They let you right off the bat. Like, this is pretty cheap because we're gonna start with concept art in usually concept art in most things like a video game or movie. Sometimes that comes when the credits roll. They're like, here's some of the concept art, like they did with stuff like I remember Resident Evil 4 and stuff like that. This they open with it because it's like we didn't have time to finish, so just use your imagination here. It's like, do you like the shading on that? Yeah, it's good shading. I don't know. So I really like how there's like an opening narration that is written out and then is not, and then it's as the narration goes on, we just get like several sketches to look at. Yeah, not really the most impressive opening to a fantasy movie.
No, and the budget was like $1 million, something like that. So, it seems like a lot to me, but I don't know what all would go into a project this big.
I mean, it certainly would have been dwarfed by, again, the only sort of contemporary movies of that age, which would have been the Disney studio, and I suppose Bluth Studio would have just been starting up around this time. 82 was the year of his first film. One of my favorite animated and fantasy films of all time, The Secret of Nim. Love Secret of Nim. But anyway, yeah, so Bakshi, as far as quality goes, like Bakshi could never compete with the big studios. But again, is that his fault? Not necessarily. And he kind of leaned into the cheapness. And in some ways, it worked for his style in the early stuff, because before Bakshi did the fantasy stuff, his style was very much gritty urban environments, which was sort of a reflection of his own childhood. I think we talked about this in the last show, but, it was 2 years ago, so I don't mind repeating. Bakshi was, the son of Palestinian immigrants. He was actually born in Palestine, but when he was like about 1 year old, he immigrated to America, and he was part of sort of the lower rung of society. He lived in low-income neighborhoods, predominantly black. A lot of his childhood, all his friends and peers and classmates were black. He actually went to an all-black elementary school until the police actually intervened and pulled him out, even though there weren't any problems, but they were just anticipating some sort of problem. So I think that's another reason why he felt comfortable with some of the urban stuff, particularly his even more controversial than Fritz the Cat film, Coonskin, which was being picketed like as soon as people got word of it. There was a certain part of the black community that was very worried about Coonskin. Even though the whole sort of point of the movie is it's supposed to kind of like make fun of black stereotypes, it's kind of the same old story. It's a satire. When we get into a satire, there's always a segment of the population that doesn't get it or doesn't want
Yeah.
to or doesn't care and takes it seriously. I don't know. Just remember, folks, when Randy Newman made that song to make fun of prejudice, short people, there were people that thought he was being serious and actually thought like he hated short people. So, and today it's 2019. We should be so much more savvy, but it seems in society still just as tone deaf when it comes to like that.
Absolutely. I would say more so. Yeah.
Maybe even more so. Like so quick to like not understand or take offense or to completely botch something's tone or message. Again, I'm not trying to say like just because something's satirical immediately makes it good or defensible, but I mean in a lot of cases there was plenty of good defensible satire that people just viciously attacked because they didn't get it and stuff. And I'm not saying Coonskin was high art. It's the same old story. When I watch his movies, again, I see what was sort of good about it, but I also see what was kind of weird or bad about it and stuff. I recommend anybody to watch Coonskin because it's one of those sort of bucket list movies for like watching something that has sort of like a reputation for being infamous and hard to watch or hard to get a hold of.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had to watch a fairly not so great version online years ago, and I bet you can't even find it online now. This was back when things like that weren't as protected. Nowadays, I don't know. I don't think it has a DVD release or anything like that.
Yeah. It's like Song of the South.
Yeah.
Like I used to watch that when I was a kid. Like it came on like television, I think.
I mean, I don't want to get into this, but I still feel like Disney's position of never releasing it is wrong. Because that's just like saying, like, trying to say it never happened.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, why can't you just put a disclaimer at the start like you do with some of these things that says, you know, historical content? And it's not like saying, oh, yeah, like, racial stereotypes are acceptable in 1940s when it was made. But it's also because there were plenty of, again, I don't mean to speak for anybody I don't know, and I wasn't there, and I'm not trying to tell, like, say, a black person that watches that how they should feel. Of course, I would never know. But it's not like there weren't black people involved with that didn't have good intentions, especially the guy that played Uncle Remus.
Yeah.
Like, that was kind of, that guy actually, I mean, Disney, for all his flaws, if you want to say, he picketed to get that guy an honorary Oscar, which he did get. He also seemed to genuinely think he was a talent. He said he was the most talented actor he'd come across in decades. He thought it was like an amazing discovery. Keep in mind, this was a guy that was only in his 40s or something at the time. He played like this older man so well. I don't know. I think Song of the South deserves a release. There's no point, but their official position for years has always been it's not getting any sort of release. And, you know, there's people on both sides of the issue, just like there's, say, black people on both sides of the issue. There are certain prominent black people like Oprah that think that the film should be released, and then there's other prominent black people that say, no, it's best to move on, forget about it. And both sides have merit. But at the same time, I don't feel like you should just, I don't know, if you're an entity like Disney and you have this vast collection of stuff, to have one that you just won't release because it had some controversy attached to it.
I'm sure they're weighing the pros and cons of releasing that thing, and they're like, well, I mean, how much money is it going to make? So
yeah. I mean, see, somebody like me, if that gets released, I'll buy it on day one. But that's only because I'm terrified of disappearing, not because I think it's a masterpiece, because it's not. I mean, actually, we talked about this a little. In the 1940s, because of World War II, the Disney studios were very depleted, and that's why they couldn't really make full-length feature films like they were known for, and they made what were known as package movies. They made like 4 or 5 in a row, and this was one of them, because all Song of the South really is 3 animated shorts with various bits of live action as a framing device around it. And there's only about 25 minutes of animation actually in the film, and the film itself is, barely over an hour long?
Yeah, I don't know. If I feel like if it wasn't Disney that owned the rights to it, that it may come out in some form. But
yeah, but they've got this image to uphold and maintain and stuff.
But I mean, you can imagine the way social media would explode if something like that. Just the news of that being released. Boycott Disney.
Yeah, I mean, I realize this movie, like for people that don't know the details of it, exactly what
Yeah,
might be conspiracy, like there is a story that has a character that is a tar baby in that, and I get that that's not a good thing, and there's not really a good way of spinning that. And it's something I've always had to realize too. Whenever I've read comics or watched something that had like racist caricatures in them, I realize that from my standpoint, as just sort of a white European, I can't really it's easy for me to hand wave stuff and say, well, things
right.
are different now because I don't have to feel that. When I read Osamu Tezuka's stuff and he has like Southern Islanders and their weird racist caricatures, it's easy for me to say, well, he didn't know and he was well-meaning, and that's all true. But I mean, if I was one of those people, I would feel different. And it's the same thing. So I would never hand wave that to say a black person and say, well, they didn't mean it. Because as a black person, you still have to like look at that thing that says this is how like people saw you for a while, big exaggerated lips or whatever and stuff like that. So I've tried to be more sensitive to that. So I don't know. It's a really complicated issue and there's not really a right or wrong answer, but maybe it's my naivete, or maybe again it's my not really being on that side of it or ever having to feel that way. But I still feel like it's the wrong thing. I feel like the right thing to do would be release it and have like a little bit of a disclaimer or something beforehand. Because the movie did have some positive effects for black people in the industry overall. What's funny is like they had a premiere for it in Atlanta, so the blacks couldn't even see it there because it was a segregated city at the
Right.
time. And Disney. It's not like Disney wasn't aware of this; he was very aware of this. So I don't know. It's not like Song of the South is this amazing thing. Like if you were going to rank Disney's animated canon, which I did. If you people want to check it out, it's on Letterboxd. It's not very high, but it still I think is an important movie.
I mean, it's like let's ban all Mark Twain novels. I mean, it was a different time and a different place. Things were different, and obviously we've grown as a society. I mean, hopefully for the better. Um, I don't know. I watched it when I was a kid. Like I rubbed elbows with black people my whole life. It wasn't like I don't even remember thinking it was racist at the time, but I was quite young when I watched it, so
Mm-hmm.
I probably over my head, the racist stuff in it. But I don't know, I'd like to watch it again
Yeah, me too.
because I do
It
have
did
fond
bring us a really
memories.
great song. The Zippity Doo Dah song is a
Hmm.
classic.
Yeah,
It is a great song.
that's
I mean,
mainly what I remember.
one of the
But
problems people had with the movie was like they weren't sure. It never really, I think, specifically states when the movie takes place. So people were like, "Is Uncle Remus a slave? Is he a happy slave?" And like Disney's position is no. This is after. This is during like Reconstruction. So no, he's not a slave. Is what we're trying to say. But that was some of the confusion because people were like, "Are we? Is this during slavery times?" And like, no, it's not. It's post that. Um, I don't know. Again, the Uncle Remus stories were by a black author, and Disney had to negotiate with his family to get the rights to it. So again, I don't think they were just dumbass sellouts. I think they were very concerned about the legacy of his work. So again,
mhm.
I don't know. I'm not trying to make excuses or anything like that, and I realize saying it's a different time doesn't always work, and it certainly
Yeah,
doesn't work in this case because again, this is well past. We're into the 40s now and stuff. So, but anyway, Coonskin is different. Coonskin, I don't think is racist. Coonskin is being very tongue in cheek about racism. And then, of course, there'll always be the thing. Well, just because this Jewish guy grew up with a bunch of black people doesn't mean like he is one of them and stuff like that.
right.
Which is kind of like what people say about like somebody like Tarantino, who Tarantino just thinks, I'm friends with Samuel L. Jackson, so I can say the N
Yeah,
word a million
yeah,
times. That kind of thing, right? So
yeah,
again, very
yeah.
very complicated issue. But yeah, I would recommend checking out Coonskin. But anyway, what I was talking about this is so before he did the fantasy stuff starring with wizards, he actually a lot of his movies were very gritty and urban, which was a lot like what his childhood was like. But obviously he did have an affinity for fantasy because he did several films in that genre, and this is the one that fits him the best, I think, just because of the way we think of him as kind of a sleazy guy and stuff. It fits well with like the Conan, the world of low fantasy, very much championed and represented by Frazetta. The sexy loincloth stuff.
Yeah.
um, so the movie again, it's I can't really tell if they wanted it to be more epic and were limited or what. But it's a very simple, straightforward movie. It's 80 minutes long. A very, again, simple, straightforward story. The characters are not remarkable or very memorable. There's not really anything particularly memorable or interesting about the film, except maybe as a whole, as a snapshot of its time and the trends that were popular at the time, and again where it fits on his chronologically of his filmography and stuff like that. But yeah, so the early 80s were kind of an interesting time when this fantasy was enjoying a certain surge of popularity, because that's really the era you think of when you think about this sort of stuff. A movie I'd love to watch again, which I've never seen all of, and I guess you can get the Blu-ray pretty cheaply, which I think we should do on the show, since I was really thinking about this stuff, which is similar but it's different, is again 1981 is the Excalibur, about the Arthur legend. So yeah, you get all these movies in like a 4 or 5 year time frame, and they all kind of have like, they're a fantasy, but they're a sort of very specific kind of fantasy, all within a few years of each other, which is pretty interesting. So some other talents on this film would be recognizable to comic book fans, in that the script was written by, of course, now I'm going to blank on their names. No, Roy Thomas, and who the hell is the other guy, the younger guy? Roy Thomas and Jerry Conway, who were very prominent comic book writers in the 70s and 80s going forward. Actually, they both worked together at Marvel. At one point, Roy Thomas was Conway's editor. He was the editor-in-chief at Marvel. Obviously, they get this gig because they both had done Conan comics. Conan, to this day, remains a Marvel property. Conan's been a Marvel property for the last few decades. And in fact, I think they're actually, this is just weird fortuitous timing, but there's a big event going on right now. The big event that's going on in Marvel right now is basically a Thor-centric event called War of the Realms, where you've got like the Dark Elves from, their weird realm invading all the other realms and then finally coming to attack Midgard or Earth. So it's very Thor-centric. I think towards the end, there's going to be some sort of like Conan crossover. So that's kind of interesting timing. Because as far as I know, Conan hasn't actually appeared in a Marvel book in decades, unless it's been like some weird one-shot or what if, or alternate thing, something like that. But this has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But Jerry Conway is a really interesting talent, because he was somewhat of a prodigy, because he his first published works as a comic book writer, he was 16, and by the time he was 19, he was the writer of Amazing Spider-Man. Isn't that mind-blowing? He is the guy that took over, I think, for actually Stan Lee himself at the start of the 70s. So all that crazy good stuff that happened in the 70s, the architect was a friggin' teenager when he started. Like stuff like the death of Gwen Stacy, for instance. He would have been about 21, 22 by that time, I think. But still, yeah, incredible talent. Jerry Conway. Jim Shooter is another one, but I won't get into that, who actually became editor-in-chief. Another guy that started extremely young. Jim Shooter was the editor-in-chief of Marvel throughout the 80s, and again, he's like a lot of people, very polarized. And there were people on his side. He did some very good things that helped the company, and then there were people that really didn't like him and his style. And he drove a lot of talent away from Marvel too, a lot of them directly into the arms of the distinguished competition like DC. So a lot of people who like DC, like Jim Shooter, because they wound up getting a lot of good artists and writers from Marvel come over because they didn't want to work with Jim Shooter anymore. But anyway, that's the whole thing. Sorry, people, you know me, I'm always going to blab about comics. So they did the script for this, Thomas and Conway, and I guess probably the idea was keep it simple, because that's more or less what we're dealing with here.
I definitely did that. I think the plot and the story and the characters are really the weakest part of the film.
Oh yeah, it's all pretty forgettable stuff.
It's yeah. I was telling you before the show, I went back to read some of the plot synopsis just to make sure I didn't forget anything, and pretty much it's pretty straightforward stuff.
There's even a couple things that happen that don't even, for a short movie, that serve no purpose.
Right.
Like, for instance, so we have our main heroine, Tigra, who is the princess of the last realm that's left. It's going to be conquered, and Necron's forces are supposed to kidnap her, but she gets away from them. Then she gets caught by them. Then she gets away from them. And then there's a part where she gets away from them because she gets kidnapped by this witch. and it serves like no purpose. Like
Yeah.
the witch has her, and the witch says to her like big minion, "Okay, go to the forces of She's like, "Oh, this could be valuable. Go tell them that I have her, and she can have them for a price." They just come back and kill both of them and take her.
Yeah,
Like, what was the point of that?
it's like those characters could have easily been fleshed out a little bit more. I think. I don't know.
Like, we thought we were going to finally have, like I was saying, like the only magic user is the bad guy. Well, she seems like she's some sort of witch, so here's another magic user, but all she does is like look in like a weird pool and like a scrying pool or something. Like, that's all she does. Like, her magic doesn't stop her from getting stabbed. The guy just walks up to her and stabs her, and that's the end of her. I mean, you do get like the moment where our main hero, looking for Tigra, comes across her corpse and is able to communicate with her for some reason as a corpse before she goes away, which fits the world, which is fine. But again, it's not really worth it. It feels like this had like no purpose at all. Like, the plot was Tigra gets captured, then she gets away, then she gets captured, then she gets away, then she gets captured, then she gets away. Like, that's basically her arc throughout this, and she gets to build up a tiny bit of chemistry with our main hero, Lamb. Although there's really no chemistry there. It's just like, oh, okay, you don't. You're fighting the bad guy too. Okay, we'll team up. But of course, it ends with them supposedly getting together.
I have a lot of problem with her character. I don't know, man. She's almost like the damsel in distress, but sometimes she actually does stuff. A lot of the time, she's just kind of laying around.
Yep.
I don't know. It's very very odd.
Yeah. Again, it does sort of fit that low fantasy Conan inspired world where women are more sex objects than they do much. Every once in a while there is like one like really badass hero, but most of the time they're just sort of there. They're window dressing.
Yeah.
And Tigra, in a way it's kind of refreshing because we're so used to the trope of like the spunky princess that like wants to go her own way, blah blah blah. She's not that.
Yeah.
She's not chafing under her father's rule. She's not saying, "Father, I wish you would let me blab." I mean, there is that one thing at the very beginning where, yes, she's in the room with her teacher, who is also like a sex pot. She's supposed to have her teacher, but it's just some other like buxom woman who's slightly older, and then we're supposed to realize, oh yeah, she's the scholarly one in this. Because, but anyway, she does say she's upset that her father wouldn't let her be present when when the delegation from Necron's forces came. Like, he's there with his son, but she doesn't let her come. So there's that one thing, but the rest, it's not really brought back or talked about, which I actually kind of like because at least after that we got kind of sort of sick of those sort of
totally
princess characters. Like, I'm so sick of my sheltered life, blah blah blah. The new Aladdin just came out. That's the same thing with Princess Jasmine, for instance. Mm-hmm. I'll probably go see that. I gotta do something. Let's see something.
Yeah, what else is on? Is that Brightburn out yet?
Yeah, I think it came out. Not interested. What's funny is, like I said, like, I'm not burnt out on superhero movies the way most people are, but I don't have any interest in this.
I may go see it. I want to see something.
I mean, yeah, exactly. You see something. I don't think it looks terrible or anything. I'm just not particularly interested. But the only live action Disney movie I've seen in theater was Beauty and the Beast, and it was kind of what you expected. They handled a lot of things better than I thought and did pretty well. But again, it doesn't capture the magic of the first one. And then there were some things that just really fall flat. The idea that Guy Ritchie is the director of the Aladdin movie kind of blows my mind. I kind of can't wrap my brain around that.
He's taken some odd choices in his career lately.
Speaking of the Arthur legend, didn't he just do like a King Arthur movie that bombed horribly? Like Legend of the Sword or something?
Maybe. He's done some stuff. Did he do that damn Noah movie or?
No, that's
another person who's hacked. No.
That's that guy who I don't like any of his movies. The guy that uses him a lot, Russell Crowe a lot. Shit, I'll have to look it up because I'm not sure. But yeah, Noah was so boring. I turned it off after about 20 minutes. I actually did try to watch that.
I never watched. I don't like. Was it Russell Crowe in there?
Yeah, it's Russell Crowe.
Yeah, I don't like Russell Crowe.
It's Darren Aronofsky, who I don't like any of his movies.
Oh, that's right.
Requiem for a Dream is the only movie he's done I like. That's it.
That's an odd movie for him to make too. He usually tries to do like more heady stuff.
As I've said, there's a movie that a lot of people don't really like that much, but just because I haven't seen it, that I do want to see, which is Oh no, never mind. It was something else. Oh yeah, The Fountain. I've never seen The
That's
Fountain, and I kind of want to see it. But I have to say, Pie is one of the worst things I've ever seen.
it.
I didn't think The Wrestler was bad. I just didn't think it was good either. I refused to watch Black Swan because it's a ripoff, and I despised Mother. I know you kind of liked Mother, but I could not get into
I've
Mother.
kind of liked a bunch of those you just listed.
Yeah, Mother just made me madder and madder the more I watched it. Like the first 10 minutes, I was fine. Then something happened. I got mad. By the time the movie was over, I was like frothing mad. Like it just made me so pissed off. It just built and built. I hated it.
You didn't like when Cain and Abel came in?
I didn't like anything. I didn't like anything. But anyway, yeah. So Darren Aronofsky to me is one movie I like. I like Rick and Morty. But hey, maybe maybe I'll like. But I've always been interested in The Fountain, so I'm willing to give that a shot at some point.
You know what's weird? The Dumbo came out and left. I haven't heard one thing about it. I don't know.
Oh yeah, and that
The
was
live action Dumbo.
And that was him and that was a guy that is used to doing that, which is taking classics and ruining them. Tim Burton.
Oh, that's right. I forgot Tim Burton did that. That may be the only reason I watched that, because Tim Burton did it. So I like Tim Burton, but
yeah, I guess it came and went pretty fast. I mean, I don't mean to prejudge a movie without seeing it, but just from the previews, it was doing exactly kind of what I thought it was going to do. It's like, let's build up a whole bunch of human characters and make them important when there are like no human characters in the original Dumbo, like except for like the ringmaster who yells and the clowns that do like they aren't characters.
Right.
They're just there, and they're basically there to do bad things. Like there's a bunch of kids making fun of Dumbo. There's the circus people that take his mom away from him. But in this, they make it seem there's like a boy and a girl that are like Dumbo's biggest cheerleaders. They seem to make the ringmaster a really nice guy. He's played by Danny DeVito. I don't know. I saw like some recent interview, like a clip of Danny DeVito talking about the movie, and he was like saying, like in all honesty, he thought Dumbo's a classic, but this was like just as good. Because I mean, I guess that's what you have to say, right?
Sure.
I'm like, oh yeah, I bet it is. But yeah, But see, Aladdin, I can at least sort of. I figure Aladdin will be kind of similar to a Beauty and the Beast style. It's not going to be as good, but I want to see how they tackle certain things.
Yeah.
I don't know. And as we said, the big glaring problem, of course, is a Will Smith genie. I can't see any scenario where that would be good.
I don't like that. It's not that I don't like Will Smith, and I don't like Will Smith, but I can't imagine him doing that role and not thinking, oh, it's Will Smith, Why does it have to be somebody that big,
No idea. I almost wish they had just like given him like the same sort of like movements and stuff as like in the original and just used Robin Williams' voice. Because they did realize for the other one I'm definitely going to see, which is Lion King. With the Lion King, bring in all these new people, make it more hip and cool, and that's fine. I get it. But they did realize that they just weren't going to do any better with Mufasa than what they'd done. So they just brought him back. So I was like, they should have done the same thing with Robin Williams, even though he's dead. Just use Robin Williams. Just use all his same lines from the movie. I get that people wouldn't like that, but I don't know. To me, it seems better.
Yeah, that would be fine with me.
I haven't looked this up, and you know what I haven't seen in like previews? I haven't seen if Iago is a character. I haven't seen Jafar with the parrot. Like, is the parrot a character that talks in this movie? Because obviously he's in the original with Gilbert Gottfried. Like, is there a different? Yeah, I'll have to look up and see. Like, is there a new Iago? Is somebody else playing him? Is he a different sort of character? But yeah, I'm gonna see it because why the hell not? But
I don't know. I'm tired of them remaking the animated movies.
They're gonna do all
live action. I know.
Part of it has to do with like I don't know, I'm mad. Part of me doesn't want to see them as a protest because there's some weird loophole about animated movies where the writers don't make anything from it. Yeah. Like the two guys that wrote Aladdin get nothing from this movie, which I think is a travesty. You kidding me? It's his story, his characters, his lines, and you don't get a dime for it? Jesus Christ, Disney! As if we didn't already have enough reasons to hate you.
I mean, who wrote the Jungle Book? Was that like Upton Sinclair?
You mean the original book, or
yeah,
Kipling, Rudyard Kipling.
Oh yeah. So, but I mean, like, it's not like any of that money went to that estate or whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, I have no idea if whoever wrote this 1967 plot to the Jungle Book is still alive. But if they were, they should have been entitled to the 2016 version, which I thought was pretty good. Of the ones I've seen, I'd say that's the best one.
I mean, I think they're only doing it just because they're cash cows. They know that they're going to make money on these things.
Yeah.
Maybe not Dumbo, but like Jungle Book was huge.
Nobody batted an eye when they did it with Cinderella. Like, nobody cared.
I don't think anybody watched the movie either.
I've seen parts of it on TV. It's a
Yeah.
very lavish and good-looking movie, but
Yeah. I don't know.
they keep trying to add stuff to the plots, which I think is kind of pointless. Like I thought Beauty and the Beast again was pretty passable, and I was impressed with how they did some of the things, and
Yeah.
you know, but they added like plot that wasn't needed. Like there was this whole thing about like I don't know, like the woman that cursed them and stuff, and something about I don't know. They had more stuff about her father and her backstory of her mother dying in Paris. Like it's not bad, but it's also not needed. Like nobody was wondering that when they watched the original Beauty and the Beast. Wow, I wonder if there's like a sad story of Belle's mother dying of a slow disease in Paris that they could put in here. Well, here it is.
Yeah. I think that one was probably better than I thought it was going to turn out. Beauty and the Beast. Jungle Book was okay, and that may be all that I've seen.
That's all I've seen so far. But
Yeah.
I will see Lion King, and I will most likely see Aladdin. Aladdin's more out of curiosity. I don't necessarily believe Aladdin will be good. I just kind of I just want to see how they do certain things.
Made $90-something million last weekend, so
Not bad. No, it's very possible that possibly the next movie I see in theaters. I don't know.
is it getting good reviews? I don't even know.
I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, like rather than risk doing some original property, they're gonna redo all their old crap.
Yeah,
Like
and there's so many more they could do. So many.
They've already done 101 Dalmatians.
I hated that.
Glenn Close, I think.
Yeah, she's not particularly bad about it, but I don't know. But yeah, that was way back in '96. That was before it became like a thing.
Oh,
It was kind of an oddity, really. It's like, oh, you're gonna now it's like, okay, that's what we're gonna do. That's the playbook.
I mean, I guess what pisses me off about it is like, why are you taking something that's so great? You know, why do you need to mess with that? You know, we don't need any more of that out. You know, I'm not the biggest fan of Aladdin, but you know, I mean, that's not a good example because that story's been told before. But like, I don't know.
As I said, I'm just sick of people like acting excited about like something animated beginning live action as if that like elevates it to a higher level or something or validates it. Because I'm like, are you kidding me? It's ridiculous. Like, I mean, I guess it's cool that there's going to be a live action Akira, but why do we need it?
No.
That New Zealand director guy is going to do it. The guy that did like Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah. I don't know. I like his stuff, but
we don't need it.
No, we don't need it.
It's already perfect.
Just write something else. Shit, there's so much stuff out there you could redo.
Speaking of which, tying back into this movie, for years, a live-action remake of this movie has been in development hell that was supposed to be done by Robert Rodriguez. As far as I know, it's dead because I can't find anything going past 2014, but in around 2012, 2013, Robert Rodriguez was talking about doing a live-action version of this movie. And that's fine, I guess. This movie is certainly nothing sacred. As we've said, the main takeaway from this movie is like it was sort of part of what was kind of a trend at the time. You know, it reminds you of stuff of that era, particularly what was becoming big. Not big, but becoming sort of a... I don't know. I've never understood. Like, it's weird tracing how fantasy in general, and then like the smaller... subgenres of fantasy, how they sort of became popular over here. So you've got, various fantasy and folklore dating back centuries and stuff like that. But if we want to fast forward to like modern fantasy, it more or less starts with The Hobbit, written in the late 30s by J.R.R. Tolkien as a prelude to his big, massive epic, Lord of the Rings, which he writes through the 40s and early 50s. Now, those books, of course, are what they are now. But it wasn't until almost 15 years after the last one was released, I think, something like that, or around that, maybe, that they really started to get traction, particularly over here, say, in the US and Canada. And it's funny, I don't remember what we were talking about, But as usual, I was talking about comics, and I was talking about Doctor Strange, and I was talking about the first artist for that. He's the same guy who was the first artist for Spider-Man. Of course, I can't think of his name now. Steve Ditko, and how Steve Ditko had like a style that was sort of trippy and cool, and it worked really well with especially Doctor Strange, because Doctor Strange was full of like cool, like trippy landscapes and stuff, and it was all very psychedelic. So that by like the late '60s, because of the counterculture stuff going on and hippie stuff, that was sort of like a hip book for like college kids and cool people to read. And that's the same thing that happened with Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings sort of got like a second life as like this big thing that would be discussed on like college campuses over here in like the late '60s going into the '70s. This seemed to lead to a generation of people, I think mostly baby boomers, that really seemed to like it. And it crept into like the facets, if they were artists, of their own art, particularly with musicians. You have people like Led Zeppelin making direct references to Lord of the Rings in their music. So you've got like these rock gods doing that. So then you've got guys that love Zeppelin and everything about Zeppelin, and they're making their own rock music. Usually we're getting to the more metal and prog stuff, and they lean even more heavily on the fantasy stuff. And it continues to this day. Like look up any like super like prolific or popular sort of like prog rock band of the last 30 years, and probably like their main lyrical content is like high fantasy stuff. It's like, if it's not Lord of the Rings, it's stuff that's like derivative of Lord of the Rings. It's talking about orcs and wizards and battles and stuff. Some of them like Dream Theater, guys like that, they have songs about like armies of elves and stuff. And this, of course, finds its way into video games as we make video games, and it all sort of just snowballs kind of in a way. And I've always just really found it interesting, like the link between like a certain kind of music and like fantasy. If you're like down in the basement in the '90s playing Magic the Gathering with a bunch of guys, you're probably like listening to Rush. I always liked how those things fed into each other and tied into each other. So then at the start of the '80s, you've got the sci-fi French magazine Metal Hurlant is getting popular over here. In fact, by the early '80s, they finally translate in English and call it heavy metal. And so again, you get all that sort of Frank Frazetta stuff, and it's all blended together with sort of like what was considered the cool hip music of the day, metal and prog and stuff like that. I've just always found that sort of marriage really interesting, because you can't really say that about another sort of genre, really. I don't know. It's just interesting to me, that genesis from like say the late '60s and until basically now, how this stuff all sort of seeped into itself into different things, and cross pollination between this and that, and how it influenced stuff. And I don't know, those lines have always been drawn. I've just always found it really interesting. But yeah, the early '80s was kind of like the big flowering of it, I feel like. And this movie was like perfectly timed. So even though this movie is not particularly good or memorable, it came out at kind of the exact right time, because it's when stuff like this was really at its apex almost. When it was really, whether you want to call it a fad or not, like it came out at the right time for sure, which is one of the reasons, again, why it got the financial backing it did, because just the year before, Conan with Arnold had been a pretty good success. So I said, okay, this is kind of like an animated Conan, let's go on. Still, I saw, again, the common refrain with Bakshi's work in this movie is I have mixed feelings. Because I also feel like, I read some various like contemporary reviews of this movie, and a lot of them reference comic books, and not in a good way. It sounds like this movie like just made people like just confirmed for people who didn't read comics what they thought all along, which is comics are like adolescent and dumb. They're like, if you like comics, this is kind of like a comic. It's stupid and dumb and not very good. So I don't feel like this movie was very good for comics. What I couldn't find, because I only thought of it, it's not like I didn't have time, but I kind of only thought of it late, was I never really got to know what Frazetta himself thought about the movie.
Yeah.
Like, Frazetta was happy with how it represented his work, or he was disappointed. I don't know. As far as I could tell, whenever I looked up Frazetta's stuff, it's like, yeah, and here's something he did. He worked on this movie. Like, I don't know what his feelings of it were.
Like, was he happy with it?
Yeah, like, I don't know.
Was Bakshi happy with it?
More so than other things he'd done. as far as I can
'Cause
tell.
I think he's done a commentary over the film.
Oh, I'd be interested in that.
And he, talks in detail about the rotoscoping process. And
Yeah, I know he's damn proud of that.
did he pioneer the technique, or he just
If he
used it a
didn't,
lot?
he's still its most like prominent champion. I don't know if he pioneered it.
It's yeah.
Actually, if I can find some stuff on the production of Wizards, there's some stuff there about some stuff that they did pioneer, basically by accident and necessity. It had something to do with photocopying or something really weird. Hold on, it's somewhere in like the Wizards article. Wish I could find it. Yeah, because there's this whole thing. Bakshi wasn't able to complete the battle sequences that the budget Fox had given him. When he asked them for a budget increase, they refused. Oh yeah, we talked about this before. It was the exact same budget meeting that George Lucas was in, and George Lucas was also refused. They both come for their various movies, his being Wizards, George Lucas's being Star Wars, and Fox, and they were both in the same boardroom facing the same suits, and the suits both told them no, which is kind of funny. But anyway, the background is. But wait, there's a thing here about. He finished the film by paying out his own pocket and using rotoscoping for the unfinished battle sequences. So it really started, I think, with Wizards, because Wizards, he wanted to have like big battle sequences, couldn't get the funding, and used rotoscoping as a way to like make it happen. But he would go on to use it since then. I don't know if it's because, again, it was just a cost-cutting measure, or if he just thought it was legitimately good. But I thought we dropped all the detail. It looked very artistic and very beautiful, and I felt, why bother animating all of this? This is about Wizards. I'm looking for a way to get realism into my film and get real emotion. In his audio commentary for the film's release, Bakshi states, "There's no question that it was an easier way to get those gigantic scenes that I wanted. It was also the way that showed me how to do Lord of the Rings, so it worked two ways. In addition to stock, oh yeah, that's the other thing. Used a bunch of stock footage from various films that they had. Zulu, Ed Ziddle, Battle of the Bulge, and stuff like that. Live actions sequences from Patton are also featured, which is pretty damn funny. So that's how he got. So it seems like I thought there was a thing about photocopying or something, but anyway, I guess I don't know. Anyway, that's another question though. Like, is this movie more of a success like than Wizards? Like, it's less ambitious than Wizards, and it's less weird and off-putting than Wizards.
That's what I liked about Wizards.
But that's the other thing. But Wizard had a certain amount of audacity to it, and its weirdness made it memorable.
Right.
But like, for good or bad, he was trying something different. This is a very by-the-numbers, low fantasy Conan type thing. You know, there's no surprises going on here, and the only thing that makes it particularly Bakshi is the rotoscoping. And again, it has a nice uniform art style based on Frazetta. And you understand that marriage. It makes a lot of sense. You're going to do this sort of thing. Yeah, use Frazetta's work. And that's fine. But considering the plot is so bland, and the characters are so bland, and the world is so bland, even though there's nothing especially wrong with it, I can't like it as much as I like Wizards, even though there were more things in Wizards that I felt didn't work. I felt like they did things in Wizards that didn't work. But there were still other things that I thought were still quirky or cool or memorable, which makes me like Wizards more.
You had seen this before, right? Before you suggested?
Yes.
Okay.
What's funny is, even though it's a short movie, I'd forgotten a lot about it. The only thing I really remembered well was the beginning stuff in like the jungle. I remember there was like, you know, and again, this makes it a little different from like the more middle high fantasy stuff is like that usually uses that more European setting. This has like jungles in it and stuff, because the whole point, this is a southern kingdom. This is the northern infringing upon the southern kingdom. So instead of like those vast forests that you would think of in a Lord of the Rings type thing, this is jungle. And that makes it a little bit different. But again, they don't do very much with it. Yeah, there's a few kind of interesting monsters that pop up, but they don't have much to do except, again, fulfill the device of her endlessly getting captured and rescued. Because the very first time she gets captured, the way she gets away is like the squad of subhumans, as they're called, gets attacked by like a big monster. And that's how she gets away the first time. So they also use it again to separate her and Lamb, because she and Lamb are together. They're really getting along. They're playing, and then suddenly some horrible underwater abomination attacks him, and that's how they get separated that time. But yeah, what's funny is like Bakshi, of course, had done television work and was doing television work in the '80s. Most notably, he was like one of the main producers of a 1980s version of the character Mighty Mouse called The New Adventures. That would actually be about 4 or 5 years after this. But what's funny is the main reason that show got canceled is because he was doing too risky with it. It was one of those shows that did a lot of getting crap past the radar stuff with a lot of adults in jokes, and the network finally clamped down on it. Something about them thinking there was a thing that was akin to like Mighty Mouse snorting coke.
Some mighty power powder.
Yeah, something to do with like a flower and some sort of powder or something like that. But he's had a hell of an interesting career. What's too bad is I really would have liked to have seen what he could have done in, say, like the '70s or '80s, like without limitations and with like a good budget and with good talent. Like he's always had to work like with, again, not very good actors. He's worked with good animators and stuff like that, but then again, you still need a certain amount of money to make it work, so he's had to use rotoscoping. And I guess he's proud of rotoscoping, but to me, I don't like rotoscoping. I don't think it's ever looked good. I think it's always looked tacky and wrong. It looks especially bad in the Lord of the Rings movie. In the Lord of the Rings movie, it's almost jarring. Like he uses it a lot, like when the ring wraiths show up, which is just clearly a bunch of guys like with a bunch of stuff on them riding around on horses, and it looks really stupid. But I mean, the characters are already so bad. I guess it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you were talking about the voices not matching the character.
Yeah,
there's definitely a lot of that going on in that one.
Oh, yeah. That
Wizards too. Wizards has a lot of that.
Yeah.
Someone.
Although I did kind of like that how he wanted Peter Falk for this role. Couldn't get him, so he just got some guy to do a Peter Falk impersonation. But yeah, so because this is, I guess it does stand out from his other things because this is a different visual style because of animation, because it's based on Frazetta's characters more so than his. Because Frazetta's are, again, more like this. They're more epic and sexy and stuff, whereas Bakshi's own style is very cartoony, very sort of goofy. You know, I think of like how some of those characters look, like the wizard guy in Wizards, the Peter Falk guy. You know, he was like little guy with a beard with like big grotesque feet and stuff. And you know, he really liked goofy, grotesque looking characters. Again, check out the Coney Island thing on YouTube, and it you know, they're very exaggerated, bizarre looking characters, which is really his style. So this movie is interesting in that, and there's an animated film by Ralph Bakshi that does not use his own art style. It uses somebody else's. And it looks pretty good. Although, again, the backgrounds remind you of something you might have seen in Lord of the Rings or Wizards. Hell, they probably reused some of them. I bet they did. But at least some of that came from good stuff. Like, I remember for Wizards, he got Mike Plug, who was a really good artist, a comic book artist in the '70s. He did a lot of the horror stuff like Swamp Thing and stuff like that, and Man Thing. He got Mike Plug to do stuff. He was a really good fantasy artist. I don't know if he's involved in this. There is somebody here who I hadn't heard of. His name is Peter Chung, who had worked on this. It turned out Peter Chung would go on to be like the guy that did Aeon Flux.
Oh, right.
So that's yeah.
Was Aeon Flux, was that a comic, or was it just that the animated show?
Yeah, it began as a show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like they spun stuff off of it. This was not a comic first. This was a show first. It was an MTV show.
Oh yeah, I watched it quite a bit.
It was an interesting show because it like had like it kind of felt like if you took an anime and gave it like a European twist.
Yeah.
And it was made by a guy who was South Korean, so.
Yeah, it's a very, very unique look, and I need to see if I can track that down.
Yeah, because my memory of it is so vague, I can't even remember if it was good or not.
I remember it being really weird, and like
I watched it because I watched stuff, and this was just at the start of my late night period. And it was a late night show, and also, you know, I like animated stuff, so I watched it. But my memory is so hazy, I can't remember if it was any good or not. The only thing I can remember is her running around on like rooftops in a very European looking city.
Yeah, and it would focus on like close up of them French kissing, or like the eye catching the fly and the lashes.
Oh yeah,
it would always focus in on things, and I don't know. It's really interesting. Did you guys have liquid television?
No, I know what it is.
That's the format that I saw it on.
Um, but we did get stuff like MTV's Oddities. Like that's how I saw The Head and The Max and
Yeah,
Beavis and Butthead. That was part of
yeah.
MTV's Oddities. That would run late at night at Much Music. But
Those were
no,
all awesome shows. I loved all three of
yeah,
those.
that's really what began my affair with late nights.
Hmm.
Was that stuff when I was around 11 and 12, and the
Hmm.
rest of my life I've been a night person.
Yeah,
Nowadays it's just not the same as we talk about, with the way programming and stuff works now. Like there's not really any sort of late night feel anymore. But for me in the mid to late 90s, it was cool because you get you get cartoons that were more adult.
yeah,
Something Ralph Bakshi kind of paved the way for, like a Beavis and Butthead. And then of course there was the adult where I would try to watch, Red Shoe Diaries or something like
right.
that. Um,
Yeah, I don't know. We always talk about this, but you had to actually make sacrifices to see stuff like that. Like
yeah.
you had you're gonna be tired of shit the next day because you stayed up to like 2 in the morning or whatever. So
Well, what's funny is like nowadays we live in like a much more diverse television landscape and stuff, and of course because of certain channels and shows, they have more content. But the idea of like some sort of like sleazy show that shows nudity coming on late at night, like I can't watch nudity on TV anymore. Like there's no, I have a million channels with a million shows, but
right,
there aren't any of those that like have nudity.
mm, not anymore.
I mean, unless it's a specialized show like HBO, but that's I don't really count that as normal TV.
I mean, I think like one of those channels, Cinemax or Showtime, just said they're not doing any more of that of the
Yeah,
softcore stuff at night.
yeah.
Which I mean, hell,
Yeah, for me it was two
wow.
channels. It was Showcase, which is the Canadian version of Showtime,
Mhm,
and Bravo. Both those they would show. They would have at least on certain nights of the week after a certain time. They would have like a sort of softcore type movies or
mhm.
shows, which I watched because that's how I got nudity.
Huh. Yeah, I wasn't lucky enough to actually have either, but we would get a free trial or something every once in a while.
Oh yeah.
But the kid down the street had Playboy, so I would just go down there and pop a VHS in, and
Plus, I had a French channel that would on Saturday night show something called Blue Nuit, which again was like softcore movies and stuff. So
I was
I
never
don't know.
fortunate enough to have a satellite dish that picked up all the channels. You always hear stories of people that
I mean,
like are,
there's something more like there's something more elegant about it because it was at least for us, like as young guys, guys going through puberty that were obsessed with like sex and
yeah,
girls and stuff like that, is that it was a good way of sort of easing us in.
yeah,
At least, but so by the time I was seeing like hardcore porn, I'd like
yeah.
seen stuff before it. Like nowadays, you can just jump to that. You can be like a 10-year-old on a computer and you can jump to like the sickest shit ever.
That's
Like,
that's kind of what bothers me. I mean, about the current generations because it is something that I feel like you need to be eased into. Like let's look at a pair of breasts for a little while first before
yeah.
we go into scat. You know,
Exactly. I mean, I'm sure that's how a lot of stuff appealed to me, or I felt more open minded. It was because like I got eased into it,
yeah.
type thing, which was not on purpose. It's just the way things happened because of the environment that I grew up in and stuff. So I don't know.
Oh yeah.
I know there were a couple older guys, like everybody, who's guilty of this, reminiscing about a time and why it might have been better. But I don't know. It's hard to argue against it.
It was
The
like the
Whether it was a show with nudity or a legitimately good show, it was
yeah.
cool to anticipate things or wait for things.
Yeah, but it's like everything was that. It was anticipation. It's Saturday morning cartoons. Like you have to put in effort to find this shit. Like
Yeah,
now it's so easy. Like everything is so easy. But
yeah. I mean, I've never been a morning person. I hated it.
me either.
I hated it as a kid. I always hate it now. And like, I would actually get up earlier than I needed to on a
Yeah,
Saturday because there was stuff to watch.
yeah. Even as a
Yeah,
kid, I had to force myself to get up on a Saturday.
yeah. Which my mom would always use as ammunition for why I should be able to get up for other things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Cartoons, man. Come on.
Yeah. But yeah, there hasn't been anything such thing as Saturday Night cartoons since at least 2002, and they're not going to come back.
No, no. I don't even think kids really like cartoons anymore once they get past a certain age. That's which is kind of sad.
Yeah, maybe. I have no idea what say like a 12-year-old likes right now.
But it's like it jumps shows like there's like SpongeBob, which is kind of, I guess, for older children. But I mean, even that's not new.
No, it's not.
But
Yeah, I
you
never
know,
watched it, but that show had a certain amount of hipness to it. I knew that. Like, it was, like, even if you were, like, 14, 15, it was still cool to say, like, SpongeBob.
yeah,
I don't know, there something about it. I don't know, because I didn't watch it. So it
I
was
think it
something like
was
little kids could watch, but an older kid could watch and not be embarrassed about saying, because
yeah.
it had some sort of cool quality that I am not familiar with.
It's kind of before my or after my time. I think
Same,
I was a little
same
too
here.
old for it.
Same here. Not that there haven't been some cartoons that have come out in the last few years that I haven't gotten into. For
Mm-hmm.
instance, a good one that I liked was Gravity Falls. That was a
Yeah,
particularly good show.
that's one I need to check out.
I always tell Ryan he should watch it because Ryan loves the X-Files, and when you show it, like, the show is about like paranormal stuff, so it's kind of like a nod to that. It has, the goofiness of like a Saturday morning cartoon and silly stuff, but it also has all sorts of like conspiracy stuff and paranormal stuff. And the character of Stan, who's like the uncle that the kids go to, he's a pretty classic character. He's just like this con man grifter guy, and he's pretty good. And he's voiced by, I think, the show's creator.
Okay, yeah.
So that's a pretty good show. So one thing, although they're not Saturday morning, like a channel I've watched in the past few years that I used to ignore when I first got it. I don't remember when I first got it. It can't even be that old of a channel, but there's a channel called Disney XD. I actually watch a certain amount of Disney XD now because stuff like that would come on it. That's how I watch the new DuckTales, for instance, which is pretty good.
Is it? Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. I've heard mixed things about it.
I don't know. I mean, I like it. I can't like it more than the original, but I have to say, of all like the shows that you've heard of, like being a remake of something older, I've never seen one that's more respectful than the original material. Like, this is not trying to one up it or say it's hipper or better. This movie is this show really pays its dues and understands that like it comes from that. Like, it's very respectful in that way, which I like a lot. Like, it's just full of nods and stuff. And what's actually pretty cool is, speaking of the package movies from the 40s. Speaking of continuity nods or whatever, like, there's actually an episode of the new DuckTales that has the two other guys from the Three Caballeros in it.
Oh wow!
Isn't that awesome? Like that parrot and that rooster or whatever. That's pretty cool. Like, they're in it as friends of, and it's cool. But they basically reference like the events of Three Caballeros as like something that happened in Donald's life. Like, he was in a band with these guys and they were friends, which is pretty awesome. But yeah, that's actually just something I mean to want to do, and I don't know how to. Like, I'm not familiar with how many of them are available on like Blu-ray and stuff because you never see them in the stores. But I want those package movies. I like them. One of my favorites is this is just a less of a package one and just a 2-for, which is the Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, which has the Wind in the Willows and the what's it called, Sleepy Hollow. I love that one. I was always very influenced by that one because they have the main reason I managed to see these package movies is I didn't see them as package movies. I just saw them in bits and pieces on what was then Family Channel in the early 90s. Like, it wasn't until years later. Like, I remember like one from like this short about a whale that sings opera that I always really liked. It wasn't until years later I realized, oh, that was part of this package movie. Like, I didn't know, because that's not how I saw it. I just saw it presented sort of a standalone thing. So that's how I saw a lot of these. I've never actually seen the package movies as the package movies, the way they're supposed to run, this segment followed by this segment. I've just seen them isolated and broken up. But I've seen most of them, which is pretty cool. I don't think I've seen anything from Make Mine Music, which is the one from before Three Caballeros. Make My Music and Three Caballeros are both similar in that they were both like goodwill films done by Disney to basically promote relations between the U.S. and various Central and South American countries.
Oh, wow.
That's what they're all about. But then they have various shorts. Like, one has like Donald, like I think taking like an alpaca up into the Andes and stuff. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I'm looking it up now.
But
I don't believe I've ever seen that.
But yeah, I've always had a fascination with those movies. And again, Song of the South would technically be one of them.
So was like Wind of the Willows and all that hasn't ever been released?
I don't know, because again, Wind in the Willows was part of that the two thing called The Adventures of. It might be released in pieces. Here's something that's kind of annoying. So I own the 1951 Alice in Wonderland Blu-ray, which I like very much. And it's nice and has some extras on it. But if I had bought the Alice in Wonderland DVD that had been released a few years earlier, it had a segment from Song of the South on it. So that's just one piece. Like, and I don't
Shit, I
think,
may have that.
yeah.
I'll have to go look and see.
But hold on, just there's a pretty good Disney wiki out there that talks about this stuff.
Speaking of that, even Make Mine Music, the budget was more than Fire and Ice.
Yeah.
And it was in 46.
In the 40s, yeah.
So I guess that is kind of a low budget, huh? 1.2
Yeah.
or whatever it was.
Oh yeah, definitely. So as usual, when it comes to like talking about Bakshi's works, I never want to be too hard on them because I realized that he was being constrained and held back by stuff that was beyond his control. And I always feel like it's a great tragedy. We never really got to see like him do like a big budget film with access to the best sort of resources. Because again, even when he had like voice actors, they're not very good. They never seem to fit the characters or give particularly good readings or anything like that. I mean, Wizards is sort of half and half. Some are good and some are bad. This one, it's the whole thing's just underwhelming. I guess none of it's bad, but also some of it doesn't even like the animation's not very well done. Like it doesn't sync up very well either. When some of the characters talk, they're just sort of like, you know, you're like, this isn't like from a different language. This is supposed to be English. It's just not well done.
I mean, it's like it's almost good. It's like just a little bit extra in a few different areas, and
that's how I
would be
feel
a
with,
good film.
With most of his films. It's
Yeah.
like there's a good concept here, or there's some good art here, and it's just never executed in a satisfying way, which is really too bad. So, as I said, I'm always conflicted about Ralph Bakshi as a filmmaker, but it's not because like whether or not he was any good. I think he was good, and I think he's talented, and I think he did a lot of good. As I said, as a fan of animation, I recognize him as a very important figure and somebody that helped champion the medium in various ways, particularly, of course, the way of pioneering, you know, a more adult style of animation here in the West. But yeah, I've never conflicted about that. I've just been conflicted about the actual overall quality of his filmography, which he can't entirely be to blame for the lack of, because, you know, I'm sure he would have liked to have been able to do it better. But I've always had a fascination with his work. And even this is one of his most simple and straightforward. And again, it's a departure in that it doesn't use his own artistic style, visual style. You know, there's still things I can take away from this that I find interesting. Again, it's more has to do with the context of fantasy and the low fantasy Conan era stuff and the era that it falls into. Again, that sort of weird era of the early 80s. But I don't know. I'll still always consider myself a fan, for sure. I'm just trying to see. I looked up some stuff. So, yeah, what's funny is like stuff like soundtrack stuff has always been available for that. They had like various book and record sets that had parts of Song of the South. Most recently, Zippity Doo-Dah and some of the animated portions of the film were issued in the Alice in Wonderland 2 DVD special edition set. Part of a 1950 Walt Disney TV special included on the DVD, which promoted the then forthcoming Alice in Wonderland film. I guess they mean the live action. But and it says the full-length film has been released in some European and Asian countries on VHS and Laserdisc. There's a 1990 Laserdisc Japanese edition that has everything.
So it never even came out on VHS in the U.S. or North America?
No, it never had any sort of home release in North America.
Wow.
Okay, maybe I misquoted Oprah. Maybe I meant Whoopi Goldberg. Sorry, I mixed up my famous African-American ladies there. Because there's a thing here saying that as recently as 2017, Whoopi Goldberg, who had recently become what's known as, remember, have Disney Legends. They've got basic, whether for various categories, whether you're an animator or an actor. Anyway, she became one in 2017. She expressed a desire to say that they should get an American release for it. So, yeah, I don't know.
What? She was in Lion King, and is that it? She done something else.
She must have done something else, because there's no way she's a Disney legend just for being a hyena in Lion King.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a very big role. Fuck, what else has she done?
I'm going to take a look here.
A pretty distinct voice, so I know I could place it. That's usually something I'm actually fairly good at is putting voices to
That's how I
the
recognize
actors.
a lot of actors, right? I'm often bad with faces, but once I hear their
Hmm.
voices, I know who they are.
I'm not good with many things, but that I'm usually pretty good at that. Like whenever I go see the newest animated thing with my kids, I can usually name, if they're a known actor.
There's got to be something else here.
The
Here's something funny. I'm looking at her thing. She's in a made-for-TV version of Alice in Wonderland where she plays the Cheshire Cat, but that's not what makes you a Disney legend. So, God, what else is there?
is it just that? I mean,
It can't be. There's got to be more. There's got to be something live action or something that I'm not thinking of. I mean,
is
she's in The Lion.
Ghost is not Disney, is it?
No.
Jumpin' Jack Flash is that Disney?
I mean, I know that she was in a Muppet movie, and the Muppets have become Disney property, but Jesus, why is she a legend?
Man, they're buying everything. Sister
Yeah.
Act, maybe.
Okay, I'm going to look up awards and honors here. There's got to be a thing here. All it says is for her contributions to the Walt Disney Company. But what are they? They can't be just voicing a hyena in The Lion King
I
and a
think
shitty...
Sister Act is Disney.
It must be. I never really thought of it as a really great movie.
No,
It's a pretty...
part two is a good one though.
I hate Part 2.
Back in the
Part
habit.
2 introduced that... Well, I can't remember her name, but I really hate her. A young version of her before she became like an artist in the 90s. I hate her music. Lauryn Hill, is that it? I think it might have been Lauryn
Yeah,
Hill.
Lauryn Hill.
I despise Lauryn Hill's music. To me, it's anti-music. It's like if you wanted to make something that was the opposite of music. And I'm not going to go on a big rant, but honestly, like it sounds like somebody going out of their way to be terrible. Is what I think of Lauryn Hill. I realize I'm not the audience. Blah blah blah.
No, she's pretty widely hated by a lot of people. She's apparently really hard to work with.
Well, I know that, yeah, but that's a personal thing. But I know she's got like an album called "The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill" that's considered like a landmark album.
It is, yeah.
Like, yeah, and I have no idea why, because that's what I'm most familiar with, and I can't, like, to me, again, it's anti-music. Like, I heard her like that song "Doo Wop," that thing, and it sounds like something you would hum in your head for 5 seconds and immediately discard. Not something like you actually put effort into and then like recorded. But anyway, I don't want to go into a whole different train of thought here.
If you want to hear some good news, I mean, Sister Act 3 is greenlit and going to be released on Disney Plus.
Woo! Just another reason to get Disney Plus.
And we got to think of some cool punny name to have. Is that subtitle? Sister Act.
The other one's back in the habit. How are they going to beat Back in the Habit?
Sister Act 3, none for you. None of this.
Yeah, I really don't see what her other contributions to Disney are.
I think it's got to be that. I mean, I think the first movie was pretty successful.
Oh, I know how to do it. I'll just look her up in the Disney Wiki.
The first Sister Act, budget $31 million, box office $231 million.
Holy shit!
Yeah, it was successful.
I didn't know that. I mean, it's a fine formulaic little movie. I don't have any problem with it. I've watched it on TV multiple times.
Fish out of water. Yeah, it's so funny. Yeah,
I was just really disappointed. I've always been disappointed by the revelation that the young nun, who has a really powerful voice, that's not really her in real life. They dubbed it with some other singer. That actress is not actually singing that well. That made me sad.
Isn't she hot too?
Well, I mean, compared to a bunch of middle-aged and old nuns, I mean, she's decently attractive, sure. Oh, this is hilarious. I went to the Disney Wiki thing, and I'm gonna there's a search engine, so I was gonna look for Whoopi Goldberg. She's the article of the week, so she's right here on the front page.
There you go.
So this will give me a good rundown of her Disney involvement. She voiced Stormella, the main villain of the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer the movie. Mrs. Peck in something called Our Friend Martin. What the fuck? I don't know what the hell those are. There it talks about, Lion King and Lion King 1.5.
Oh, God.
She did a voice in Snow Buddies, which I guess is Disney. And, of course, like I said, she's in The Muppets. And Muppets Tonight. Yeah, I guess both Sister Act movies must be Disney properties. Huh, she even voiced the Game Master in Miles from Tomorrowland. Yeah, named a Disney legend. She voices Llama in this season 2 of Elena of Avalar. Man, Disney has so many properties. I have no idea what the fuck they are.
Yeah, I know what that is. It's like a series, cartoon series.
Yeah, don't know it. You know what? Also, is pretty like I don't really that interested, but it's actually really high quality. Is they made a series, they made an animated series of Tangled. It's really well done, high quality shit, and it has the actual. And guess what? It has the actual actors from the movie in it,
Is
which is
Mandy
weird.
Moore in it?
Yeah, it's Mandy
Really?
Moore. It's that same guy. Yeah.
See, I'm a big fan of Tangled, but I don't like the animation style of that new cartoon.
I like it. I don't love it.
It's they've they've done that with a lot of stuff. Like they've done a Turbo, like the Snails movie. They've turned. I mean, it's like it's more cartoony style, but
Yeah.
and they did that with the fucking Alien movie. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The Rihanna Alien thing.
I'm
Home.
gonna be back really fast. I need a drink. I'll be
Okay,
really quick.
I'll talk more about Disney shows. Yeah, they've done that with a lot of shit. They changed up the animation style, like from what it was originally to obviously something that's less expensive, and it's easier for them to put the content out cheaper um, when they change the animation style.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean it's like a lot of straight to Netflix stuff is doing that, but I'm sure that'll eventually leave Netflix and go to Disney Plus.
Sidebar. Here's my Korean sweetened milk drink that I've been
Oh
obsessed
wow!
with lately. So yeah, so there's a Korean restaurant just around the corner that I eat at sometimes, and they always had this. And then I realized there must be a way to get this because there's Asian grocery stores around. So
Right.
a 6-pack of this, and you'll see this is smaller than a normal can. A 6-pack of this is $15.
Whoa!
How about those import prices,
Yeah,
huh?
damn
So
tariffs.
so I can only get it every once in a while, but I really like it. I don't know. You don't have to store it in you don't have to keep it refrigerated, so I guess it's not really milk because milk would go bad.
It's something they do to milk. Like we have,
Drink milk is the only thing in English on it. I don't know what anything else is on it.
we have some of that milk that you can store. It's like one step above powdered milk.
Anyway, supposedly it's a very popular and cheap drink in China and South
Exactly.
Korea.
That sounds interesting. I may try to pick one of those up.
Yeah, it's just sort of like we expect. It tastes sort of like a sweetened milk. Is more or less the taste. Yeah, you must have some Asian groceries around.
Oh yeah, we have tons.
Yeah. What's funny is there's a specifically Korean grocery store, but it doesn't carry this. But the generic, just Asian one, which is run by Chinese people, does have it, which works out for me because it's close to where I live anyway. But yeah, $15 for a 6-pack.
Wow.
Good thing I didn't get 2.
That's got to be like just the maybe novelty. They're adding some additional cost to that just for because it's rare. It's hard to come by.
Yeah, the guy I said, "Whoa!" What he said, he even sort of apologized, like, "No, I get it. You gotta import this stuff."
Yeah.
It's good stuff, though.
What else do you like? You picking up any of the wasabi stuff with wasabi on it? The squid chips, anything like that?
Nah, not really into their snack food at all.
It's definitely different. I'm open to it, but I haven't really found a lot that I enjoy.
I mean, there's definitely some Chinese and Korean and Japanese meals that I'm okay with, but I've never been like into their snack food. I think they have weird snack sensibilities.
It's weird
I remember
combinations.
I got like some shrimp flavored chips once years ago. This was before I was even I was always Asian obsessed, but this was when I was just with some of my university friends, and I think it was our first time ever in a Asian grocery store. It was sort of a novelty back then, and yeah. I also said the worst thing I ever drank came from an Asian store. It was cane juice.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound bad. It's the worst thing I've ever tasted in my entire life. Counting things that got in my mouth that weren't food.
Wow. Yeah.
Nothing was more foul than that.
And it
Like,
was probably really expensive too.
yeah, probably. I can't remember now. Like, I literally spat that everywhere, and so did my friend at like the same time. And like, it was only like maybe this much of it, and I don't think I could have finished it for like $100.
Wow.
I don't think I could have choked it down. Honestly, it was
Yeah.
that foul. It was that foul.
There's a lot of that stuff that it looks good, but first of all, it's really expensive, so you don't want to, chance that it may not be good. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'd like to
What's
go in there
funny
and
is,
try everything.
yeah, I didn't even know what was in this. I just bought this on a whim one day when I was getting my meal at the Korean when I saw they had a Twister, and I was like, oh, it was really good. And it wasn't until much later that it occurred to me that I could probably buy it somewhere. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so now every once in a while I get it, even though it's super expensive. It's not like it's super amazing or anything like that, but I don't know. Plus, now I don't drink pop, I get more alternatives, so.
I'm sure like Kobe Bryant did a cool commercial for it.
Yeah, probably. I just read something the other day about like Brad Pitt doing a commercial for something in Malaysia, and like a whole bunch of people in Malaysia like boycotted it because they're like, "What? Aren't we handsome? Don't we have handsome enough people here to like be spokesmen?" They were really mad
Oh
about
shit! So that's becoming a national thing, huh?
like bringing in like an outsider to prove something.
I thought they loved outsiders though.
Well, they do in Japan and places, maybe not as much in Malaysia. I don't know, because like Japan's kind of like the origin of it, right? Like some sort of like celebrity, big or even low level, like doing something in Japan. Because back in the day, especially before the internet, the whole idea was, I would never do like this shitty, stupid commercial here. It'd be bad for my brand. But I'll do it over
Right?
here. It's paying me lots of money, and no one's going to see it.
Yeah.
Well, now everybody sees everything.
Yeah. Like immediately too.
Immediately, yeah. Didn't they have a whole thing about like that on Conan a few years ago? About Conan, like it wasn't real, but like the idea that he'd done a bunch of like stupid commercials in Finland.
I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure it's pretty fun. It's something like Finland or something like that. It's pretty funny. And the whole idea was like, yeah, like I didn't think anybody would ever see these, but then the internet came along, so it's like, no, I'm just going to show them to you. And it's like Conan making an ass himself doing like fake Finnish commercials or something. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, Conan's a funny guy. He's got that. What is it, Conan Without Borders or something like that? Whatever it is. He has a show on Netflix.
Yeah, that's on Netflix. I haven't watched it yet, but I mean to because I like that kind of stuff.
It's good. He puts out good content.
Yeah, he's a genuinely funny guy. Like,
yeah,
he's done enough stuff that like shows like that he like thinks quick on his feet and can do stuff like that's the difference between him and say like I'm not saying like Jay Leno's not funny, but I don't think Jay Leno could like improvise that well.
Like I'll say Jay Leno's not funny. I don't think he's funny.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm not particularly into him either. I realize that he's got a thing, but I just feel like more like Jay Leno's got a certain delivery that people like. But I think a lot of his best jokes somebody else writes.
For sure. No. Yeah. Conan's definitely a very witty guy.
Yeah. Like the last thing I ever time I ever watched Conan's show. This is like 4 or 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It had to do with like. It had to do with like some Asian restaurant, like some Thai restaurant, and he was going to deliver for them. He was like at the Asian restaurant, and he was going to do deliveries for them, and they had an order, so he was going to take it out in like New York City or something like that. And the whole thing is super funny, and I'm pretty sure like none of it is staged. It's just him like interacting with people. Of course, he winds up giving all the food away, and at one point he just goes into like another Asian restaurant, but like not even Thai, like some other thing, to try to get the same order to bring to the people and stuff. It's really funny. He just has all these really good interactions. Again, I don't think any of it's a bit. I think it's just organically what happened. And I think it's sort of proof of his like, his actual talent because he's just riffing and making stuff up on the fly and reacting and stuff, and it's pretty good.
Well, I mean, he was a writer first, right?
Yeah, so, exactly. He wrote for Saturday Night Live. Yeah. He wrote for The Simpsons. So yeah.
I mean, I think.
But like, I saw that documentary that like followed his tour. Years ago though, and I'm surprised by the honesty of that because it kind of proves that like fame did go to his head to a certain extent because he does have this whole entourage around him that all have to laugh at everything he says, and he's got that guy from 30 Rock and he's mercilessly making fun of him.
Yeah,
and like you can tell like it's kind of mean spirited, but everybody's going along with it. It's like, why would you say that? Like one point he's like playing piano and he's just like, I'm a brain dead stupid hick, nobody likes me and all this stuff. Like, and he's like, yeah. So it shows that Conan has gotten a little bit mean, and also like he's gotten kind of he's famous to the point that he has sort of a bunch of yes men, like because he's the boss. That's Conan. He's the talent. You got to laugh and stuff. So, but I mean, I give him credit for showing that side of himself because he could have just hidden it. Like
Is this after he lost the Tonight Show?
Yeah, it was that thing exactly.
Okay, yeah. I
He
saw it.
lost the Tonight Show, so he decided to go on like this big around the country tour. Yeah, and they did a documentary of it, and it's really good. But I'm surprised, but I'm also kind of impressed that he showed that side of himself, because he shows some side that shows that I've got kind of an ego, and maybe sometimes I don't treat the people around me as I should. Yeah, so just maybe he saw it and learned from it, and he's not as bad as he was. You'd like to think. It's not like he was a total prick. Like, there's way worse people out there with diva behavior. But, this was just showing that, sometimes he gotten in a little bit of a bubble because, he is Conan, he's the talent, et cetera, et cetera.
He's next door neighbors with Adam Sandler, so you can imagine he probably does have pretty good ego on him. Like, he's got like Adam Sandler over here and like Timothy Oliphant on the other side. So he's like surrounded by, superstars.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine that. Do you know who I am?
Exactly.
Yeah.
How come every time like a talk show guy loses his show, he grows a beard? Like Letterman did it. Letterman did it. It's like, I'm off the air now. Time to grow a beard. I get it. It's part of the whole beard of sadness type trope, right? Like, my life doesn't have much meaning now. I'm more introspective. No point in shaving. Just let it grow.
I've been shaving for so long. No more.
That's true. That might happen to me eventually. I mean, it happens to me in spurts. I never let it go completely long, but I mean, I do go through that kind of thing.
Oh, not for me. People just tell me I look like a boy when I shave, so I don't do it anymore.
You've cultivated a look that people are too used to.
I had two people tell me in one day that I look like a minor, like a little boy or something. I don't know. So never again. I mean,
it's weird seeing like Seth Rogen without a beard. You're like, what? That's not right.
Yeah.
I know. Ryan basically got to that point too, which was funny. Because like I remember like the irony is like I shaved for his wedding, but he didn't. Because I'm the one who always talks about how I loathe shaving and being clean shaven.
Right.
Well, lately I bought a beard trimmer, which I like, because that way like I don't ever have to like deal with like the big long 30-minute shave. So that's actually been a pretty good investment on my part.
So you just like keep it short.
Yeah, so I usually keep it in this sort of range type thing without having to shave it completely. So I like that. It's not completely convenient because it's hard to do. I only have a small sink, and I'll often get little tiny hairs on everything. And every time I do it, I feel like I have to rinse off everything that's around the sink. But still, it is pretty good. It's an improved situation, because it used to just be like either shave all the time, which I never did, or let it get to be quite a thick beard and then spend forever shaving it and cutting myself and make my face raw. So now I can at least make that not as needed.
I mean, if you don't shave fairly regularly, your skin gets really irritated.
Yeah, and that's where
that happens to everyone.
I've always had a sensitive skin anyway, but yeah, there's that. As I've said, every time I shave, this area especially always turns really blotchy.
Yeah, razor burn and stuff. Yeah, I hate that.
And like for years and years, they always say this is sensitive, and then what is it? Gillette just came out with like new ones called like Skin Guard. I bet you they feel exactly the same. I'll eventually buy one and try one. I bet you it will feel exactly the same.
They're so expensive too.
Oh, I know.
Like they're locked up in a container. Like you have to get someone.
Same here. Yeah.
Like people are so like they're going to steal them because they're so expensive.
Well, it's the same thing here. You can get like the thing, but you have to go behind the counter to get the actual razor.
Pardon me, can you unlock the razor so I can have a razor, please?
No. Here's my ID.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I'll take some spray paint and some lighter fluid.
Yeah, and some KY. Oh man, I remember buying KY once, and of course it was like the worst case scenario, because like the person that waited on me was like a 20-something fairly attractive girl. Yeah. And I did the usual thing where I bought like 7 other things with it.
Yeah.
And everything was fine. She didn't give me any weird looks or anything like that. But then, like, after she put my stuff in a bag and gave it to me, and I said, thanks, she said, have a good night. I was like, yeah, I'm going to have a good night, yeah.
Typical night, pack of Magnums, some KY.
Yeah. Remember when Homer does that on The Simpsons to buy the illegal fireworks?
Oh, is that what he did?
One of the classic ones. The one where the one where Lisa makes friends with the cool kids. Milhouse is like, look, it's Lisa with them cool kids, and she looks like Blossom because that's how long ago it was. I
Yeah,
think it's like Christina Ricci or somebody does the voice of
that's
the
a
girl.
fun
But anyway,
reference.
they're all like beach kids and stuff like that. But anyway, Homer wants to buy illegal fireworks because it's 4th of July. He's like, just go. It's like no big deal. Just act like you buy them all the time. He's like, give me a large box of condoms, couple porno magazines, and he's like, the other thing is like a couple of those disposable enemas. Like you can just buy those. And he goes, and some illegal fireworks. And the guy's like in a poo cologne. He's like, I'm sorry, sir, but in this state, fireworks are. And as soon as the guy walks out, he's like, come with me, and he takes him to a back room full of illegal fireworks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the classic ones. That's from the classic era. That's like 96, 97. Really good one.
And that's like after Blossom. Like the reference was supposed to be funny.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
because it was a dated reference then.
Yeah,
That's
they're all and they're all referencing like Baywatch and
it's
stuff
hilarious.
like that.
Yeah.
What's hip and cool, but yeah. At one point, like Marge looks at all the stuff he brought, and she's like, "I don't know what you're planning on for tonight, but count me out." And he's just like, and then he blows up the dishwasher.
That's another thing I was thinking of when you were talking about releases. Like The Simpsons, they released like maybe 10 seasons on DVD.
Yeah,
and then they just stopped and no more.
That
But
seems awfully weird.
they
It's
also
like
released them, and they had little boxes, and they would all, they look like they matched until like season 6, and then it was shaped differently, and it was shaped like Homer's head. Then they did a few seasons of the heads of the different characters that won't sit on a shelf correctly together. Then I think they switched back to the boxes, so it's like a mess if you're trying to collect them all.
That would drive me nuts because I'm the type of person that likes consistency. As I said, my biggest complaint as like a book person is like when I buy series, I want them to match. And since I can never buy them fast enough, there are always new ones like Harry Potter, Narnia. I just have unmatching ones.
Yeah,
because
I hate that.
Buy them fast enough. Like I'm supposed to buy them all at once. Fuck off. So like almost none of my series match up unless they're like maybe a trilogy, which I can handle 3 books okay. But almost all like, especially the big ones. Like I said, something like Harry Potter are so famous. There's like a new cover like every few months.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you were buying like every edition of Harry Potter since the first one in '97, every new cover. I mean, like how many would you have gone through by now?
So Fox, their 20th Century Fox, is it just the motion pictures that was bought by Disney, or was the entire company, like the entire umbrella? I know not Fox News, but
I do not know. I know, that there were certain segments that it doesn't have or something.
But like with the releases, the home video releases or home media releases.
By the time you and I like died, Disney will just own everything.
Yeah, it seems like they need to put a stop to that, right?
You'll go to like the hardware store and you'll buy a ladder, and Disney will like get its cut from the ladder company or whatever.
Yeah, But I know like they own the rights to the movies now, so that New Mutants movie will probably never see the light of day.
Yeah, and that one looked like it might have been something kind of different. I know I've been really down on the X movies, but at least it looked different.
I was interested in it. It may not be any good, and I'll see the new one that's coming out.
Oh, I will not.
Yeah,
Dark Phoenix to me is them just twisting the knife even further. They're like, there's no Shi'ar, there's no space opera. Fuck you.
I love Phoenix so much, though.
It's so great seeing like the last 2 Avengers movies. For me, like it's just sort of everything finally getting there, because everybody heard me bitch early on about how comic book movies were all for the newbies and they were simplified and they were all about origin stories and stuff. Now I think Marvel did the right thing. It was a slow build. So by the time everybody else that's not a comic book fan says they're sick and tired of it, I'm like, this is when it's getting good though. Like I love the new Avengers. It has fucking time travel. We had to build to it. I get it, but I mean, that's what I want. That's what I want in my comics, and that's what I want. Galactic empires and stuff like that. So, yeah, the idea of what they did, I realized that they retconned out the 3rd X-Men movie that everybody hates, but it seems like it's just sort of a do-over, because it still seems like, okay, Jean becomes Dark Phoenix for no reason, and she flips out on everybody. Yeah. Where in that, it's like, well, the Phoenix Force is like this cosmic force, and there's this whole galactic empire that wants to get her, and she's being corrupted by the inner circle of the Hellfire Club. That all seems to be completely written out, and it's no, Jean is crazy.
That's stupid.
It's just such an insult.
But I mean, it's such a great story. I don't know why they don't just sell that.
I know. This is what I'm saying. They could have done the same slow build that the Marvel films did. The first X-Men, they could have all along been planting the seeds to this. So that by the time we got to Dark Phoenix and the Shi'ar, it all would have fit. It all would have been in place, but they didn't. They did the same thing for 3 straight movies, and then I don't know what they did after that because I kind of lost track of them. But the first 3 movies are the same thing 3 times. It's humans hate mutants. Oh, the humans really hate the mutants.
Oh, now
And the
they
mutants.
really hate him.
Oh yeah, now they really hate them. And Magneto sure does hate the humans.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know. Trying to think. I I haven't seen Apocalypse. Our friend Eric says Apocalypse isn't bad,
I
but
like Apocalypse, but that's me.
so I don't know. I'll watch it. I guess I remember Days of Future Past is a massive disappointment, but it's probably better than the original 3, so that's something.
It's probably the best of all of them, I think.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
But the new one, it's Jean is that Sophie Turner playing that character?
I know the name. Who is Sophie Turner?
Sansa from Game of Thrones.
Oh, is it? That's interesting. Isn't the one that plays Arya in the
Yeah,
one you just said, the New Mutants?
I'm not sure what her character is, but she's in there.
New Mutants would have. I mean, I'm not. You know me. I'm not really pro show, but New Mutants is too bad. If it was they were going to make a Netflix show, I think New Mutants could have been a good Netflix show. I can't. I'll never. I'm not going to bitch about it, but like, they're going to do a 3rd season of Jessica Jones for some reason, even though they got rid of everything else.
Really, I didn't know that.
I mean, Daredevil's the best thing that ever happened, as far as I can tell. I mean, and I'm not as mad about it as I should be, because to me, Daredevil's simply a miracle. But yeah, I mean, Iron Fist was turning itself around, getting good. They canceled it. Luke Cage, kind of the same thing. They canceled it. I think there's going to be a 3rd season of Jessica Jones, and I have no idea why. Because the 2nd season was crap. Like, the 1st season I really enjoyed, and everybody's heard me. They're sick of me talking about how much I hate the character,
Yeah.
but I still really liked that season. And then season 2 was so boring and bland.
I didn't get but maybe a few episodes in. And
Disney needs to stop spreading all this stuff around. Like, what's the point of having, say, a nice tight little world on Netflix where Daredevil, Punisher, Iron Fist, Jessica Jones, and Luke Cage all tying together and on Netflix, and then just throwing a Cloak and Dagger show on ABC? What does that accomplish?
I know.
Who does that?
What's that other? They have another show out with the guy from Avengers. Shit, I can't even keep track of all this stuff. But it's
Shield show. I mean, that's
the Shield show, Agents of Shield. Yeah.
So that's a pretty long running show, and I know that it had some cool stuff in it, but I just don't have the patience for it. What's funny is, okay, so before I saw the newest Avengers movie, I found a Marvel timeline, but based on the cinematic universe, because obviously a Marvel timeline, and it's still super long. And one of the main reasons it's so long is because it's full of stuff, revelations from the Shield show that I didn't know about. So stuff from Inhumans too. It's a really good timeline, but it'll take you forever to read. It is kind of cool. Like, I get it. Like, it's the difference between that and comics is the comics have to have a floating timeline. There's certain stuff that did happen in a certain year, but other stuff you have to keep moving around and stuff. The idea of the cinematic universe is you can have a fixed timeline. You have an actual birth date for some of these characters, and you don't have to move it around, which is kind of cool. I mean, it fits the medium. I don't have any problem with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, certain characters you don't have to move it just because they're fixed in the past anyway. Like in the comics, Steve Rogers was born in 1920. That's just how it is. But as I've said many times, like, I don't know what they're going to do with Magneto. He can't keep being a Holocaust survivor. You know.
As long as he's played by Ian McKellen, I don't care.
I hate that casting. You heard me blame it. I like Ian McKellen a lot, but I do not like. That's one of the. There's one of many. I don't like most of the castings, but that one I despise. I hate it. I hate his Magneto. I hate it. I hate it.
Hello, Charles.
Oh, Charles, I'm so catchy. Look at Mystique. You have no idea. And his like motivations keep changing in those movies.
Yeah. Well, he keeps going from a good. I mean, from a villain to a sympathetic character.
Yeah, at one
You
moment
just
he's
can't
like,
keep.
sometimes he's genocidal, then he's like
Yeah,
not so bad. Like I don't
yeah.
know.
It keeps flip flopping. He's like all right until someone else in his life gets killed by the humans or whatever.
Now, to be fair, they've done some of that flip flopping in the comics too. They have had that happen, but that's over a period of many years,
Right.
you know. And sometimes they've even had to like retcon things. Like so, in 2001, Grant Morrison launched the new X-Men series, which threw a lot of weird stuff out the window and changed things. And actually was like directly influenced by the first movie in that he changed a lot of their costumes into stupid black leather and stuff. But again, it's Grant Morrison, very, very good writer. And he did a lot of cool stuff with it. But one of the things he did was like this long thing that he'd set up from the beginning was there was this new character called Zorn, supposedly a Chinese character with a full face mask, you couldn't see who it was, and had a really weird, ill-defined power set. They said something like his head was like a neutron star collapsing in on itself, something really fucked up and stuff, right? And this is a long game, many issues. This is a long run. Eventually, after a long time, it's revealed that there is no Zorn, that it was Magneto the whole time. He reveals himself as Magneto, not Zorn. He's been undercover, and then he like massacres a bunch of people in New York. And then eventually, this was towards the end. This was like the denouement of Morrison's run. So near the end of that, they were like, this kind of ruins Magneto. Even though he's always been a villain, we can't have him massacring innocent civilians in New York. Usually, anytime he killed people, we had to at least have some sort of reason for it. So they had a retcon that Magneto didn't do that. Oh yeah, and he also kills Jean for like the 15th time Jean dies or something like that. So they had to like retcon that. What's funny about it though is like it wound up making Zorn a real character, but to this day they still have no idea what to do with Zorn. So like Zorn, there's been at least 2 different versions of Zorn. They still don't know who exactly he is. Sometimes they say Chinese. They still don't really know what his powers are or how they work. So it's just led to this whole can of worms. That's kind of funny, but also yeah, they were like, I was like, I don't know. Did you have to greenlight? Like, you guys see these comics before they go to print. If you didn't want Magneto killing a bunch of people, couldn't you have like stopped him instead of like making a really confusing retcon about it later on? But that's always the comic book way, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the typical comic books, though. You kind of, after a certain period of time, you start the story over and tell it a different way or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, most of the time, if you're a long time reader too, you roll with the punches.
Yeah.
You don't get too high or too low, which is something I think that modern people with everything has really lost sight of, whether it's movies or TV or whatever. Like this whole Game of Thrones thing. As far as I can tell, unlike me, who quit this show in season 5 and had a lot of problems, it seems like most of the people that are flipping out about the last season of Game of Thrones were huge Game of Thrones fans. They loved the show until the 8th season. To me,
Sure.
that's gold. You got 7 amazing seasons, and now you hate the whole thing because you didn't like the last one. And I know the argument for that. It's like, well, everything hinges on the end. I understand that argument, but it's not how I feel.
It's really, I don't know. It's really a statement about where we are in the fandom of things. People thinking that they can change anything about. It's like I think it was Sophie Turner that came out and said recently that it was like disrespectful to the creators and the crew of the show to say that you want it rewritten because you don't agree with the way it was written. And I kind of agree with that. I mean, I'm not 100% satisfied with it either, but they did what they did. They were limited on time and budget, so they did what they did.
Yeah.
And
It's impossible to please everyone, and I
exactly.
get that. I get, although I mean it's true. I haven't really heard anybody defend this last season, and I don't really know the beats of it or anything like that. But yeah, I know we talked about this before with some of our friends at the Sausage Factory and stuff too about like this. And like I said, it's like this new era of fan entitlement, which I think has gotten way out of hand. I know our friend Cameron seems to be a little more sympathetic on that because because I remember once years ago, this was before that, where I talked about critics, and I was like, well, what we even really need critics exactly for? And Cameron said something, well, critics keep the artists honest, but I don't really fully agree with that. That seems to suggest that most artists don't have any integrity and they only care about like monetary gain and the bottom line, and that they only see what they're making as some sort of product. I realize that there are some artists like that, and I also realize there are some artists that start out with a lot of integrity that eventually turn into that through various circumstances. But I still don't take the dim view that that happens to most artists, or that that's how most artists start. I still like to think that most artists, storytellers, whatever you want to call them, start from a good place with a lot of integrity, which is just more about doing the best they can and doing it the way they want to do it. So I don't really fully agree with that idea of, oh, well, we need critics because they'll keep artists honest because they'll just get lazy and stupid. I'm just like, well, if they're lazy and stupid, then they'll get replaced by better artists.
Right.
I mean, that's the way it works with almost any job. If you get lazy and crappy with it, then you'll probably get replaced by somebody who's better at your job. Not always, but I mean, ideally, that's what happens.
Yeah.
So yeah, so again, people are always entitled to stuff like that. Like I'm always baffled every once in a while in my Twitter feed because I follow various comic writers and artists. I'll get like artists having to defend like their art on something like, and I don't get that. I've often read a comic where I was like, I don't feel like the art's very good in this episode, in this comic, like this issue. Like I don't know if the artist, like there was a deadline or whatever, but I don't feel like the art's very good. And that's the end of it. I don't tweet the artist directly and tell them I thought the art was bad. What the fuck does that accomplish?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I paid $3.99 for the comic, so I guess I can just yell in their face about it. Like, so I don't understand that. Why do you feel the need to go out of your way to do that?
I think because you can is the reason why. Like before this whole thing, you know, social media, whatever, you couldn't talk directly to these people. You could like maybe write them a letter or some shit if you could find their address.
I know.
You know, I mean,
if I ever actually do publish anything that anybody gives a damn about, I'll probably just get off Twitter.
It's a lot of positives and a lot of negatives.
Yeah,
because
I'm not one of those people that can't handle criticism. I'm fine with criticism, but I don't understand the point of a bunch of people feeling the need to tell you they didn't like something just because. Okay, you didn't like it. Well, some people did like it. Whatever, like.
Yeah.
I don't know.
With the
same thing as we say about like YouTube videos and stuff like that. Like, there's tons of stuff on YouTube I don't like. I don't see the point in watching it and leaving a negative comment.
Right.
What does it accomplish? Well, this was really fucking stupid. Blah blah blah. Yeah, if I find something stupid, I'll be like, okay, I'll stop watching and find something else. Like,
you're stupid and ugly.
Yeah. Okay. Exactly. Like, what is it?
Exactly.
I disliked the way you chose to express yourself, so I feel the need to make you feel bad. It's a pretty sad state of affairs.
That's the world we live in, I think. Well, like, whereas if they liked it, they probably wouldn't say anything at all.
No.
But with Game of Thrones, the big argument is that these guys were so ready to move on to Star Wars, they just kind of pieced this thing together quickly and, just threw it out. But
it's hard to believe, though. I mean, this was a big show. It's hard to believe anybody being that flippant about it. Something that big and serious. This was a pop culture phenomenon, this show.
Right. And I mean, it's their baby, essentially.
Yeah.
I mean, at this
I have
point,
a hard time believing that, like, suddenly they were just like, oh, okay, let's just wrap up here. I'm not defending because I haven't seen it. And as I said, I haven't really liked it since the 5th season for different reasons. But when I didn't like it, that wasn't, again, I didn't feel the need to lash out or say anything. I was just like, okay, I realized they've had to make various changes from the books. And of course, they got to a point where they ran out of book.
Right.
So, to me, no one's to blame for that. I just don't particularly like it. But now it's all about assigning blame.
I think it's a combination of them trying to please everyone and also not having the budget to do what they really want to do. They really should have fleshed this whole thing out into like 2 full seasons. Maybe they would have had time to do what they wanted to do, tell the story they want to tell, but they didn't have the money or the time or whatever. I'm okay with it.
Most people accept about most shows, which is funny because, as I said, one of the reasons I've never been a fan of TV is because of limitations like that, right? And I don't blame that on anybody. It's just sort of how it is. But what I've realized is, to me, I'm kind of not the norm there. Most people are more used to it. So I'm really surprised that the Game of Thrones audience is vast. So it's made up of a lot of people. A lot of these people read the books and love the books. A lot of these people do this and that. But there's obviously still a massive percentage of these people that are simply TV show watchers. They don't read the books. They don't maybe they don't read any books, but they but they like this show. And so those are the type of people that I figure are pretty savvy when it comes to these things and understands these limitations and usually likes them anyway. They'll like a show where I'm like, yeah, but I didn't like that you had to fit that all into like a 45-minute time frame, blah, blah. But that's what they grew up on. And that's what they're used to. Weird that they're getting picky about that kind of stuff now. And again, I know I'm probably overstating it if I talk about them being picky. Maybe I would have hated the 8th season too. But again, if I do hate the 8th season, it's also because it was building on a few seasons I already didn't like. So, but for these people, it seems like it's kind of out of nowhere. Like they were pretty much on board for 7 seasons. Maybe they didn't like everything, but they still really liked it a lot. And 8th season, it felt like it was going over a cliff. And I know that happens. That happens with a show. That can happen with things. And I know, again, I've got like sort of a unique take on things with endings. For some people, everything hinges on the ending. I'm not that kind of person. But I can't say the endings aren't important. Of course they're important. So
It's, it's no Roseanne that you found out that the last season was just a figment of her imagination. It's no St. Elsewhere where you found out the entire show was just
not just a kid's dream or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
From what
not
I can
bad.
tell, like reaction to that wasn't even that bad. Like people seem to think that was fitting for the St. Elsewhere one. Like they weren't mad.
I would be mad if I gave a shit about that show. I think that's the only reason why that show even is still in pop culture references because of the ending.
Yeah.
Oh, it's art. It's brilliant art.
It all took place in a snow globe.
But yeah, the last season of Roseanne is fucking ridiculous. Like I watched it a few years ago just because of how insane it is, and you find out in the last episode that it was all bullshit, all a dream, whatever.
Yeah. It's okay to do that for one episode, but it's not okay to do that for a season, is how I feel. I think you can get away with having it was all a dream episode or whatever, but you can't do that for a season.
Mm-hmm. And then Roseanne came out and said a bunch of stuff and got fired from her own show.
Yeah, and then they changed the name and went on without her, I guess, right?
Yeah, we don't need the title character or anything to make this show work.
I think they were just, it was an extra fuck you to her, probably, right? Because they were pissed off about what she did.
Did not do very well at all without her.
No. Well, I mean,
I'm not a Roseanne fan by any stretch, but
I never watched the show. It was on when I was growing up, but again, that's not one I ever watched.
I liked it okay. I watched quite a bit. But like I said, I like sitcoms. But
yeah, like when I watched Big Bang Theory, to me, like Johnny Galecki came out of nowhere. I didn't know.
Oh yeah. He was in.
I knew that he was on.
I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Christmas Vacation. Like he was the kid in Christmas Vacation. But for me, that was it. I saw him in Christmas Vacation. He disappeared for several decades, and then he came back to be Leonard on. Yeah. Oh, of course, he did have a small role in the movie I really like, Suicide Kings. He's basically the comedic. He's basically the comedy relief in that movie, and he's really funny.
That's Darlene's boyfriend and future husband.
So it was funny when they were going to make the new seasons of Roseanne, they would have commercials for it, and suddenly Johnny Galecki's walking around with a full beard, acting different than Leonard, and I'm like, who is this guy? What? It was sort of jarring and weird for me, and I didn't even watch the show, just because I was only used to seeing him sort of one way.
Oh, he has a beard on the show? I didn't even watch the new seasons.
Or at least he had a beard for like it was clearly his like first episode coming back, because it's like, huh? And he turns around, it's like, hi mom, or something like that, and he has like a beard, yeah.
I think the guy that played the other daughter's husband, I think he killed himself in real life. Or died of a drug overdose or something. Or
that's macabre.
But so do we have anything coming out this summer?
No.
Nothing.
No, wait, there's gotta be something. Hold on, let me think. Man, I guess the Spider-Man movie comes out this summer, doesn't it?
Is it? Okay.
Sometime, I think. Besides that, I mean, like right about now, the monster movie's coming out. I don't care about that, but a lot of people do. The Godzilla thing. I think it's basically a do-over of the last Godzilla movie. I think they're pretending the last Godzilla didn't happen. Are they? Or is this actually a sequel?
I think it's a sequel.
Oh, it is a sequel. Anyway.
I believe.
I really did not like the 2014 Godzilla. I like the 98 Godzilla more. And the 98 Godzilla is not good. I really hated the 2014 Godzilla. I saw that in the theater with expectations and was so let down. Maybe not so let down because I have to like different from you. I know you like creature features, so I've never been a monster movie person.
I've never been a giant that
Oh, okay.
type of monster
Oh,
movie
okay.
guy.
You're right. You have to make that distinction. That's true. Like,
I mean, I like some of the stuff, like King Kong, is okay,
I
but
like the old Japanese Godzillas in black and white, but that's more for their kitsch value than saying
yeah,
they're like good movies. They are what they
just
are.
just not really my thing.
Right. So, but I don't know. There's somebody we know that cares about this movie.
I mean, I have friends that are really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
It sounds interesting because they're actually. I mean, I think one of the problems with that new Godzilla movie from whatever a few years ago
Was
was,
Godzilla didn't get much screen time?
yeah, but I mean that's the main complaint from people. But I mean, I think the original film didn't have a lot of film either.
Right.
But um, but
People
anyway,
forget that the original one actually had a decent amount of plot in it that people seem to
yeah,
forget about. And I
it was
especially like the
a well
American
made
version
movie.
that added like an American character out of nowhere to it, which is pretty funny too. I like both versions.
But they used monsters that we've never heard of. That was one thing I didn't like. That you know, there's so many classic Godzilla enemies to choose from that they made some up. They're like this is nuclear thing and nasty bug.
Yeah. Well, this one, yeah, they're gonna hit us with the classics. I
Yeah,
guess
yeah.
Mothra and stuff like that.
Which is, I mean, I'm kind of looking forward to seeing that. I mean, you got to love Mothra.
Yeah. I realize it's a movie that's best seen on the big screen, but honestly, I'm gonna wait.
Uh, I'll see. I may see it. I don't know. I have a friend of mine that's like that's his thing. Like Godzilla is his biggest
Oh yeah.
biggest like love of film and life in general. I think so. I may go see it with him. Like
Yeah.
we
I mean, if I had somebody like that to go with, yeah, I'd probably go too.
yeah, just to.
Somebody that's actually enthusiastic about
I
it.
mean, he's like traveled around the country going to conventions. Actually, have Godzilla conventions.
Wow. Seems like
So
a narrow market.
he's a. You'd think so, man. Like we met the original guy in the suit when we went down to
Wow.
Orlando a few years ago, and he's passed away since.
Yeah.
And it was him, and then one of the other actors in the film, or he was somehow involved, maybe the director or something. I mean, like 90-year-old Japanese guys,
Yeah.
but super nice guys, as you would expect.
Yeah. I mean, you have to also expect that, like, back then when they were making these movies, they had no idea it was going to have, like, such an impact on the
Oh
world
yeah,
of pop culture, right? They're like, we're making, cheap monster movies. So
yeah.
you can imagine, like, how surprising that would really be to you for to
Mm-hmm.
turn into this big thing. So here's something nobody talked about, like, in our chat or anything like that. Have you seen anything for this movie, Ma?
I've seen a trailer. I think.
Yeah, I saw the trailer when I went to see Avengers. I think I saw it in theater.
Seems odd.
Like
I mean, I
some
guess
sort of,
they're
some
they're
sort of thriller. It's like a thriller. It's like she's
yeah.
really mentally disturbed, and
Oh
this
yeah,
group of kids is involved with her.
they
Looks
give quite a
different.
bit of it away in the trailer.
Yeah, as always.
Yeah,
I always have to do that, which is really
it's
unfortunate.
Octavia Spencer, I think, and she
Yeah, I
always
was
does a good job.
gonna say she's a pretty big deal right now. So yeah. So it looks kind of interesting. Yeah, it's not something I probably would see in theaters, but oh no, it's the last movie I didn't see wasn't that, and they didn't play it that. I saw Pet Cemetery. That's where I thought
Oh, how was that?
not good, man.
Ah, shit.
It's just really dull and not scary. Doesn't have any of that dread. And it's funny. I read an interview with King himself. This is always his way when he talks about the movies. He always just shrugs his shoulders, like, "Yeah, it's fine." I think because he talks about how the change of making it the girl who dies instead of the boy, and he says he doesn't mind the change because it really still goes to the same place. Wrong. No, so that's not true. Having it be the girl changes things significantly, and as you can imagine, the ending is different from the ending of the original movie and the book. Um, no, it was not good. It was just boring and bland, and there's not one good thing I can say about it.
Oh
Like
man,
it wasn't terrible or anything, but it was definitely a waste to see it in the theater. I can tell you that much.
I know my kids are itching to see it.
Show them the original.
Oh yeah, they love it. We actually, that's the only what is it? They released it with the. It's even better than 1080p. What is it? It's
The 4K.
4K. Yeah, that's the only 4K disc I own. I think because they wanted to get the
Cool.
the new one.
I own a few 4K releases, but I can't watch the. I don't
Yeah.
have. I got The Thing in 4K. Well, luckily it's got a disc that's in the 2K or whatever.
Right.
I got Blade Runner 2049 in 4K.
Right.
My Ant-Man and the Wasp might be 4K. I'm not sure. Yeah, I've got 3 or 4 4Ks, but I don't have a 4K TV. Do you need a player for a 4K too?
Yeah, you need a player and a TV.
Jesus, I'm never gonna get that. I'm never gonna get that.
I have the TV. I mean, I have one in my living room, and I'm just like, I don't know if I want to.
It's wasted on somebody like me anyway. I don't notice visual stuff the way other people do.
I think you have to have like a massive television before you can see the difference too.
Because I mean, I'll often hear people like Cameron and stuff talk about like transfers. Like I know when a transfer is bad,
Right?
but usually I'm really bad at like noticing stuff like that, unless like the movie has a particularly like color scheme or something like that, perhaps. But yeah, no, it was disappointing.
That sucks.
Cemetery. Because like I was interested, because I was like, yeah, I mean, it's not great, but I'm interested to see sort of a horror movie in the theater. That's why I saw Us. Us at least wasn't a waste of time. Like I didn't think Us was very great, but at least it was something that like entertained and engaged me, whereas Pet Sematary did not.
That's one I need to see too. I need to see both of those.
I like Us more than the other one, but
Really?
that's because Us at least felt more original. As we said, there just doesn't seem to be anything original about Get Out to savvy horror fans like you and me. We've seen stuff like that before a lot, and as I said, seen so much.
I mean,
lives.
Like had I not seen every bit of that revealed in the trailer, I would have still seen it coming.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh.
Us does show a bit of growth as a filmmaker. Like the guy, what's his name?
Jordan Peele.
Yeah, I was Kenan Thompson.
Close enough.
Yeah, black, funny guy. Yeah, on the TV show. Master of Horror, Kenan Thompson. But yeah, I mean, he is a legitimately good filmmaker. Like and he is a real fan of horror. You can tell. So I mean, I'll continue to watch him with interest, assuming he wants to make some more movies. So Us is definitely worth a watch. But again, it's sort of the same thing with Get Out. I don't really see this inherent cleverness in it that people think it has, or anything like that.
I would like to see more original stuff like those two than him trying to do like Candyman or whatever he's got attached to lately.
And Us actually feels somewhat original. Us feels, I mean, as horror goes, it's going to always remind you of something, borrow from something, but still, it's fairly original. And no, I did like Us. I don't regret seeing it. I regret seeing Pet Sematary.
Well, Get Out is
like, it's doubly disappointing because I think the original movie's pretty good, and it's one of my favorite of the books. So to see like an underwhelming bore fest like that is a letdown.
I mean, Get Out is like you said, exactly like Stepford Wives, and or even like what was the one we were talking about with Katie Holmes from the '90s?
Oh yeah, Disturbing Behavior.
Yeah, that's the same vein as all that. So.
And I feel like any sort of like racial commentary was making is undercut by some of the things that are said and happen. And then there's some terrible leaps in logic. I mean, I might as well hash them out. People have already brought this up besides me. But like this idea that like really the cops would never tie her to any of these boyfriends of her disappearing. And like after she dating these guys. Like this guy, she's been with him at least 4 or 5 months. So she's just very quickly dating these guys and luring them out, and yet nobody's finding the common denominator. Now, you can say all you want about like cops in America not looking for young black men. I'm not saying that's not a thing.
That's the point, right?
I'm sure it's a thing. Not saying it's not, but I'm also saying you're getting to a point where they'd have to be deliberately not even trying anything because she's the common denominator. She was the boyfriend. A guy goes missing. The cops interview her and say, "Well, you were his girlfriend. You know what happened?" She's like, "I don't know what happened." Okay, no leads here. Okay. Then a few months later, the cops interview her about another boyfriend disappearing. You know, she's not moving around. It's not saying that she jumped from a million different cities, so that seems like a big problem.
So that's why they're taking black guys or
Yeah,
black people in general because
she's
they
the
won't be
lure.
missed, right?
Yeah, and she's the lure. But yeah, they're trying to make that statement about that they won't be missed, even though they're all. I mean, again, they prove in this movie that this guy has people that care about him. His friend almost finds him.
Right.
His friend is my favorite part of the movie. I like that guy, the TSA guy.
Yeah.
I think there's like a worst ending where like she kills him or something.
Oh shit.
I think if you get the DVD, there's like an alternate ending where like she like kills him. I think. But anyway, and then there's that whole thing too where he literally asks one of the people, "Why black people?" And the guy just shrugs. It's like, why not? So he says that it's all arbitrary. So that completely undercuts it. I was like, did anybody else watch the movie and not hear that line where he deliberately asks him why black people, and they answer, "Well, no actual real reason." Like, did everybody miss that, or are they thinking he's lying? Like, so to me, that really undercuts if there's any sort of message there about racial.
Because I mean, it could be any race, right? Or it could be any person.
And that's what the guy basically says.
Okay. It's not like we want to jump high and run fast.
Yeah, exactly. They could have said it, but they didn't. I think it's Stephen Root.
Stephen Root, yeah.
It's Stephen Root who says it. But again, it would have done us a much better service if we could have watched that movie without them constantly hitting us with trailers that show like the guy bolted to the chair.
What the fuck, man?
But why show that?
I mean, trailers used to be so good.
Of the movie. That's the climax. The only way you could possibly show him in the chair is if there was like a bunch of other stuff that happened that was even more shocking and crazy than that. But there isn't. Right. That is the penultimate moment of craziness, is that he hasn't gotten away, they've caught him, now he's in the chair, and they're going to do stuff to him. Like, okay, they don't reveal in the trailer exactly what they do. Big deal.
That's the twist, though. Like, that would be like if The Village, like, they showed you the fucking, like, end scene of the film in the trailer. You know, like...
All you need to do is show the trailer and have a few lines, and it'd be like, something weird is going on.
Man,
that's all the audience needs to know. Like, something's weird is going on here. This is obviously, he's in danger of some sort. This is a thriller. And yet they think we're so stupid. They have to show, like, him getting attacked, and they have to show him in the chair. Like, fuck that.
Yeah, fuck that. I think it just speaks to the stupidity of the audience.
And probably somebody like Jordan Peele probably objected to the trailer, I bet. I bet he probably was like, do we have to run this trailer like this?
He probably didn't have any control.
Yeah, exactly. And they're like, hey, we got to get butts in the seats here.
We got to...
You're an unproven comedian guy. Yeah. We got to do what we got to do.
He's got a name for himself now, so maybe he can get some more creative control or at least like Final Cut type stuff.
I mean, at least the Us trailers don't really give anything away.
I haven't even seen a trailer for Us. I mean, I've seen basically what happens just through social media and pictures and stuff, but.
It's pretty good. I mean, I don't think it's anything amazing, but it's pretty. I felt good about it because I did not really like This Is Us, and I felt like, or not This Is Us, sorry, Get Out, and I felt like this was a step up. I felt like this was an improvement.
Get Out was fine. I just felt like it was extremely overrated by people, and Well,
now they're doing the same thing with Us.
Yeah, it's.
I know though, like if you like type into like Google like top like 100 thrillers or top 100 like horror movies of all time, look for like really new lists, and like Get Out is already on them. Like, give me a break.
Top, yeah. Well, like, it's not an original idea.
It's like way ahead of like movies I would consider absolute classics, and it's like way ahead of them.
Huh. Yeah. I'm not surprised. No, it's like you look on IMDb, the top movies, like half of them came out last year,
Yeah. What's that called? Recency bias.
Mm.
That's another thing we live in, a world of recency bias, which isn't just applied to stuff like art either. It applies to something like sports too, right? The team's only as good as like their last game.
Right.
Like, who cares about everything they might have accomplished up to that point? They just lost, so they suck. Mm-hmm. That always happens. I mean, as much as I hate the Bruins, I kind of feel a little better about them being in the final right now, leading 1-0, because I'm thinking, yeah, as a Leafs fan, I'm super frustrated, and I'm used to the world dumping on me and saying, haha, the Leafs are out in the first round again. But if you look at it this way, the Leafs took the Bruins, who might win the Stanley Cup, to 7 games, and nobody else has done that. So maybe they're not nearly as shitty as everybody seems to think they are, and they don't need to change a million things. But in the time of recency bias, it was just like, the Leafs are knocked out of first round, they're shit, they're horrible, nothing's changed, or they had to overhaul the team, blah, blah, blah. But now it's like, well, the team that beat them might be the team that wins the Cup, and they actually took them to 7 games, which nobody else has done. So, again, I'd much rather see the Blues win this Cup than the hated Bruins, who I hate so much. But at least it might prove a thing or two about the Leafs.
I was going to go look at the top movies, but yeah, the guy from Roseanne, he did die of a heroin overdose.
Ugh.
2002. He's actually Irish, believe it or not.
Huh. That's the same year that the singer from that 90s band, Alice in Chains, died of a heroin overdose.
Wow.
He also died from an heroin overdose in 2002.
It's a hell of a drug.
I'll never go near it. Terrifies me.
You wind up, your doctor puts you on some Oxycontin and you wind up on heroin.
Yeah. I know, it's getting a big resurgence, like out in the Midwest and stuff, places like Ohio.
Yeah, it is.
I remember seeing like a special on TV about it. It was pretty disturbing.
Well, that fentanyl is becoming really popular.
Yeah.
It's, extremely, it's basically toxic. It's so fucking strong. But it's like supposed to be like only for like terminally ill, patients on like hospice. All these doctors just like prescribing it for like everyday aches and pains, and you're like addicted in like a week.
The Fire and Ice is available on Blu-ray in 1080p. I almost wish they would release like a Ralph Bakshi set. I would actually get a set. I'd rather do that than have to look for the movies individually.
Yeah.
So I knew when I was picking it that this is one of the least interesting of his films, but it was just sort of something I felt like watching again. And as we've been coming off some harder stuff, we thought this might be something easier for us to do. Plus, as I explained in earlier episodes, just because of like what was going on with Game of Thrones and stuff, and it just sort of got me into a fantasy mood and stuff again. I just wanted to look into some of that fantasy, particularly that vein of fantasy, the swords and sorcery stuff, and I thought it wouldn't be a bad one to do, considering we did Bakshi before, but it was 2 years ago. It was April 2017. So if people are interested, you should check out that episode. Maybe I'll retweet it or something if people want to look. Did a fairly short episode about wizards, which is a fun one. And I mean, it depends upon how easily we could find some of his other movies, because they're not easy to find. Particularly, like some of the ones I'm most interested in, they're not easy to find. So can't say for sure what we might do of his in the future, but the one I definitely want to do is Cool World, even though we freely acknowledge it's not a good movie, but because there's actually a lot more to talk about there than, say, something like Fire and Ice or Wizards, because of all the stuff it involved and the story behind it. So that's something I'd like to do eventually.
Yeah, I'm cool with that. That's Brad Pitt, right?
Yeah, a fairly early role for Brad Pitt too. Like, he wasn't a star at the time. I think it was 92.
Was that before the Tarantino, the Tony Scott film Tarantino wrote, True Romance?
True Romance, yeah.
That was before True Romance, okay.
True Romance was 93. I would say that 94 was when Brad Pitt entered, like, star status. I think it was maybe Legends of the Fall or something. They might have done it. A film I've still never seen.
Yeah, it's not good.
And yet it's always mentioned as like a very memorable film for him. I don't know why.
Because he's so hot in it.
I guess, but he's hot in a lot of stuff.
I mean, he's got like long, flowing blonde hair.
Yeah. Like, I remember for years I never saw California. And I saw it. It was so super predictable.
Yeah.
Pretty boring. And I don't even think he was cast right for it. I don't think it should have been him.
Was he in Interview with a Vampire before? I mean,
Yeah, that was '94 too. So I think '94 was like the big sort of star making year for him. That was a big deal. Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise in a movie together. Oh, that's what's coming out. I guess sometime soon. When is the Tarantino movie coming
I
out?
don't know.
Because
Soon. It's
this is the first one he's done in a long time. I'm interested in because like he just did like a couple westerns that like they weren't bad. Well, actually, I don't actually think Django's bad, but I did like the other one, the Hateful Eight or whatever. Even though I just wasn't really in the mood to watch another western. When I finally did watch it, I was like, yeah, it's a pretty good movie. But this I'm legitimately interested in because I like its subject matter, and it is pretty cool that Brad Pitt and Leo DiCaprio are going to be in the same kind of in the same movie together too. Something we've never seen. So that's going to be coming out fairly soon because it's like doing the festival circuit right now.
yeah,
So,
it's already been shown, so it must be sometime soon.
so I'll definitely go see that. And most movies that start Once Upon a Time in are really good. And I think Tarantino is more aware of this than most people. So I think he felt confident that this would be very good. Because Once Upon a Time, I mean Mexico, not so much, but Once Upon a Time in China, Once Upon a Time in the West, Once Upon a Time in America
Yeah,
are all excellent movies. So yeah, so I'm interested in that because it's really about like what it's like late '60s Hollywood, which is something we've talked about a lot on this show, including as recently as the last episode when we were talking about The Other Side of the Wind, which was shot in the '70s, but we talked about the movement of the '60s. And as we've mentioned many times, we did a whole series on the New Hollywood movement, which really started in the late '60s. So you can refer to any of those episodes. But yeah, it was just a really interesting time, and it's really cool. Like they've got several people playing, real life people from that era,
right.
including Sharon Tate, one of my heroes, Bruce Lee, of course. So that's cool. So yeah, they got like they've got a stunt scene between like Bruce Lee fighting Brad Pitt's character or something, which is pretty cool. So yeah, looking forward to seeing that whenever the hell that comes out.
I think A River Runs Through It was one of his big films in '92. Same year as Cool
Yeah,
World,
yeah,
and he was
those were
in
like his first like sort of starring roles.
Thelma and Louise. He wasn't the
Yeah,
feature or anything, but
that's '91. That's like when people
yeah,
first like saw him, and
and he
I
was like
guess
in his underwear and shit, and they're like, he's so hot.
yeah,
We got to put him
that.
in this other movie.
Yeah. I mean, I give
And,
credit though. Like he's a good. To me, I think he's a good actor. Like, I mean, sure, he got
I
where he
do too.
was because of his looks, but at least he was proved a pretty good actor. And he's
Yeah.
in a lot of movies I like.
I mean, it's like DiCaprio. You got to do what you got to do, to get where you want to be creatively.
Yeah,
To where you could pick and choose the projects you want to work on. Sure, you got to do you got to do a one for the studio every few years, just
yeah.
to keep your, I guess, availability or paycheck, whatever it is.
Yeah. I've always been a DiCaprio fan. He's in a lot of movies I like, and you got to give the guy credit. He throws himself into it. He really likes acting. He really
Sure.
throws himself into his roles. As I've said, I can't think of another American actor that has like done more accents than him. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like he's just checking off a list for accents because like he's done like the cowboy accent in my favorite Western, believe it or not, The Quick and the Dead, which I realize is not a true Western and is mostly a throwaway movie that most people don't like, but I like a
I
lot.
like it.
You know, he does.
He's got the Boston accent.
Oh yeah, in one of my favorite crime movies. What is wrong with my brain? The Departed.
Yeah, that's it.
He does a South African accent in Blood Diamonds. He does some sort of like I don't know Kentucky style accent in The Great Gatsby, but like that cultivated, but mixed with that. Well, maybe not. Maybe it's more of a cultivated thing. But he has some sort of accent.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one.
I like that. I think that was the perfect movie for Baz Luhrmann to do. Like it really fits. I mean, it's one of those movies that has because it's Baz Luhrmann has like weird anachronisms in it because it's like set in the '20s, but it uses like modern music. There's like a scene where they're like driving into the city and they get passed by like this car full of black people and they're playing like I don't know something like what's her name, like Jay-Z and what's her name,
Oh, Beyonce.
Beyonce or something. But I don't mind that. But yeah, I thought that was a good movie. I thought it was a really good adaptation.
I need
And
to check
actually,
that out.
one of the most perfect roles for Tobey Maguire to be in. I thought that was like the perfect casting for Tobey Maguire. because he's like the cousin that's like who's like the centerpiece of the movie. Like it's a perfect role for somebody because like a shy, uh, off to the side type of guy that just has a bunch of stuff happen around him where everybody else is bigger and more important. Like that's the perfect thing for Tobey Maguire because he's such a nondescript, shy guy. But anyway, I know he's done other accents too.
He did The Aviator. What is Howard Hughes' accent?
Yeah, I don't really know. I
Generic
know.
American dude,
Yeah.
like Roaring Twenties, or
But anyway, he's done a lot of accents, is my point, and he's done them pretty well. I give him
whatever
credit.
his accent was in the Revenant, whatever that was.
Still never seen that. I'm sure it's really good. I get that it's awesome that he throws himself into a freezing river in real life. But I
That's
don't
good.
care. Is that the one he finally won the Oscar for?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was basically sort of a do-over. Everybody thought he should have gotten the Oscar for Wolf of Wall Street, and he didn't. And then he did Revenant. They're like, "Here's your Oscar."
Yeah, it was. Yeah, exactly. It's a good movie. I mean, I think The
I
Aviator
think
is a
Wolf
good
of
movie.
Wall Street is super overrated.
Which one?
Wolf of Wall Street.
Oh, really?
It just feels like kind of like another sort of Goodfellas type movie.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's based on a true story, but it has almost the exact same sort of plot, except it's less violent. It's like, here's this guy that, did a bunch of illegal stuff, and life got crazy, and it was amazing, and he did so many amazing things, and eventually the law caught up to him, but he didn't really have to go to jail for too long, and then he cut like a weird deal, and now he leads a life that's not nearly as good, but it's honest.
That was actually the exact pitch for the film.
I'd assume.
I mean, yeah, I like it for what it is. I mean, I'm not going to say
I enjoyed it, but I don't think I'll ever watch it again. It's like 3 hours I'm going to spend again.
Yeah.
It's not like Seven Samurai.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of people are super impressed with it. I remember Pizzo loved it. I was like, I don't know. I think overacting is really easy. I bet you it's super easy to pretend like I'm not an actor, but I could do a scene where like I'm all fucked up on Quaaludes. That doesn't really take like a strong emotional range. It just takes me making weird faces and spasming around. Like I don't know why everybody thinks that's great acting. That's like the basest form of acting. Real acting is like conveying actual real emotion and changing. It's not acting spazzy and weird.
Yeah, I mean, knowing Leo, he may have actually been on Quaaludes.
And so that's not even acting. That's method. Yeah, sometimes we'll talk about whether method acting is any good or not.
I like a lot of actors that use it.
It has its moments. Sometimes I think it gets overused. I think there's a lot of times where method was not at all necessary. And I think most actors don't like it because they don't like working with other actors that use it because it just annoys them.
Yeah, sure. Like the shit where you like you want to be called the character's name on set.
Yeah, like Jim Carrey driving everybody nuts being Andy Kaufman.
Oh man, can you imagine? That's a great documentary too.
Yeah, I watched that. That's why it came to mind.
Yeah.
Andy and me or whatever.
He was a fucking nut job, man. I think he really had a psychotic break or something.
Kaufman or Carrey?
Well, both. I mean, Carrey. Yeah. I think Carrey's crazier than Kaufman was.
Yeah, I think so. He just rambles nonsense nowadays and paints weird pictures.
Well, I mean, he's still acting. He's got a show on Showtime, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure it's fine. I'm not interested. Like a children's entertainer or something.
He looks like an old lady now. He has like long hair and he's super wrinkly.
Yeah, well, I think that's for the character, but yeah.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Because the character looks like that.
Okay.
He's method.
Yeah.
He's going method.
Yeah, we should do a list of like when method went out of control. Like, I don't know. You can say Christian Bale in The Machinist, but I mean, I think he does a great job in the movie.
I really like that movie. I haven't seen it in a long time, but I really like it.
I mean, sure, I mean, they probably couldn't have done it, any other way unless he actually did lose the weight. But
yeah, I mean, yeah. Sometimes when it comes to like gaining or losing weight, like I understand that's more of a necessity, right? It's like, well, what are they going to do? Like put you in a fat suit or something really stupid.
I mean, they've done that before, but I mean, you got to respect somebody that's willing to do that.
Yeah, I do.
I mean,
because it's not an easy thing.
Like Jared Leto, was super fat for 5 years because he played the guy that shot John Lennon.
Yeah, and that's a good movie. I don't know if it's worth it, but it's a good movie. But yeah, on the same note, it's funny. he's one of like the darlings of the last few years, and he's so handsome and in so many movies. But Ryan Gosling, like several years ago, like gained weight for some role that didn't even get it, and he's like, I didn't even get hired for like 2 years because I was fat.
Oh fuck, that sucks.
I can't remember
Look,
what it
I
was.
got really fat. What movie was it? Do you remember?
I think it was maybe some sort of like comic book movie. I think he was just supposed to bulk up, but then like he didn't get the role, and then he just sort of kept eating and got fat.
It's like
Something like
you remember Chris Pratt used to be pretty good size, like on.
no. See, I had no idea. Again, Chris Pratt to me is somebody that came out of nowhere. I didn't ever see the show he was on. He was on what that show that's a ripoff of The Office.
Oh yeah, Parks and Rec.
Yeah, it's just The Office in a different place. Parks and Rec, isn't that him? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard that he was sort of doughy on that show, but I've never seen it.
Oh yeah, I mean compared to how he looks in the fucking Guardians of the Galaxy movies, man.
Yeah.
He's like bulked up or whatever.
I like him fine. He's a likable guy, but I'm really glad that talk of him being like Indiana Jones has died down. I did not like that talk.
Well, Harrison Ford said no one's going to play Indiana Jones.
I hope he's right.
I don't know where he's coming from with that. I mean, maybe he's just making a plea.
Yeah, he's probably. I don't think he has control over it.
I mean, I agree.
I hope
agree
he's
with
right.
him. I don't think anyone else should try to play that role. Same reason I don't think anybody should have tried to play Han Solo, but
yeah,
didn't stop him.
No, maybe that's why.
Man, out of the gate with that shit. Can you believe it? Like, way to drop the ball early, man.
Yep.
You've seen it, right? Oh yeah, that's right.
Solo?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not terrible. Yeah,
No, it's not terrible.
I said all the same things I said before. I didn't like the start. I thought the second half was better. The super unsubtle ending is ridiculous and made me actually laugh in the theater. I don't think Woody Harrelson fits into Star Wars. Yada yada yada. Yeah, those things.
Yeah.
What's weird is like, I thought there was considering the way it ends, I always thought there was going to be a Solo 2. Then I saw on Twitter like it was like fans are asking for a Solo 2. I was like, wasn't there always supposed to be one? Like I thought they were trying to make a couple of these or a few of these. Like,
man, fuck. I don't know.
I can't keep track of the shit Disney does anymore, and they can't either. That's why they shouldn't own everything because they can't keep track of it.
Solo was the one that they switched directors, right? Ron Howard came in?
I know Ron Howard came in. Who was before him?
I'm not sure.
Okay. I know Ron Howard came in. And I also felt weird, too. I mean, it was like Ron Howard directing a Star Wars film. I don't know why that seems weird, but it does.
I guess they were just trying to go with someone they knew that could get it done.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he's good for that.
I mean, yeah, Ron Howard's
I'm pretty indifferent to his work, but I can't say he's not a good director.
Yeah.
I mean, did he make Apollo 13?
Sounds right.
I really like Apollo 13.
There's some films he's done that I really like. I can't place it right now, but like Splash. I like Splash.
I mean, basically what I know about Ron Howard, I know from, Arrested Development.
That's so funny that he's on that show because it's so like self-aware.
Yeah.
It like talks about him all the time.
Yeah, he hadn't done anything I cared about forever. Like he did Solo: A Star. Before that, he did Inferno. Don't care. In the Heart of the Sea, never saw. Rush. I don't know. I don't even know what Dilemma is. And of course, the other one, Angels and Demons, Frox Nixon, The Da Vinci Code, Cinderella Man, Beautiful Mind. Like he did Apollo 13. So yeah, I mean he did a Backdraft, which I like, and Apollo 13, which I like, and just a bunch of stuff that I don't dislike or like. Just a bunch of stuff I'm completely indifferent towards. Beautiful Mind, I thought was stupidly overrated. Like everybody went nuts for that. That was in
Willow, right?
Yeah, he did Willow, which I was watching some of our episode on that recently because it was another fantasy film from the 80s. But yeah, he did a really good job with Willow. I forgot to mention that's one I do like. So again, if anybody's wondering, we do have an episode on Willow.
Ransom's okay.
Never saw it.
I like Parenthood. I like Willow. I like Gung Ho.
Never saw Gung Ho either. I've seen parts of Cocoon. I've seen parts of Splash, but I never saw all of them all the way through. Then yeah, he did a couple movies with like Russell Crowe that I think were super overrated. A Beautiful Mind and Cinderella Man. I didn't think either was bad. I just didn't think there was anything good about them
I
either.
agree. I'm realizing that the films I like of his are like in the 80s.
Yeah, exactly. He did that stupid movie Ed TV.
Yeah.
With Matthew McConaughey. Which I feel like they just put out because they were like, well, Truman Show's popular. Let's do Ed TV because it was the same year.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, I like Truman Show. That's one of my favorite Jim Carrey movies. I think it holds up pretty well, actually, considering how dated it is in some ways.
I haven't seen it in years.
I haven't seen it in that recently, but I don't know, maybe a year or two.
I may not have seen it since the theater.
Oh. No, I've always really liked it. I've watched it multiple times. I've always thought it was really good. One of his better attempts at drama. I mean,
I think he does good.
It's not complete drama. It's still got some there.
I like the Kaufman movie. Was it Man in the Moon or something like that?
Yeah, it's not bad. I mean, he certainly does a good performance. I feel like they focused on some of the wrong things for that movie, but what they showed, he was really nailing it.
Mm-hmm.
But there were parts of like his life that they should have focused on that they didn't, and then there were parts that they showed too much of. Like, why did they have like a 20-minute sequence about the wrestling stuff? Everybody knows the wrestling stuff. It's all over the place.
I think when you say Kaufman, that's what you think of, or that's what a lot of people think of.
I know. I just feel like there were parts of his life that people didn't know as much about that they should have focused on more to show, and they didn't do that, which I think is dumb. But and as I've said many times, my favorite movie of his is not a comedy. It's Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Mm-hmm.
Which is funny because I haven't watched that movie in maybe 10 years because I find it so emotionally gut-wrenching. But I still love it. I own it on DVD, and I'll watch it sometime soon. I'll get over it.
That's got the who's the actress in that film?
Kate Winslet?
Yeah.
She's really good in that, too. I've never particularly been a fan of hers, but she's really good in that.
Yeah,
everybody's really good in that. You got Elijah Wood. You got that British guy who I never think of. He's in a lot of stuff.
Kate Blanchett's going to be like,
Kirsten Dunst is probably the best she's ever looked in a movie.
Meryl Streep. Like in 20 years, we're going to be talking about Kate Blanchett like we talk about Meryl Streep.
I hope so. I like her better than Meryl Streep. I'm a little sick of the reverence for Meryl Streep. I mean, I get it. I understand that she's very talented and very respected, and you know, she's done a great job as a really serious actress that never really had to go by her looks because she was never really classically beautiful.
I think that's how she pulled it off. Yeah. So I mean,
because I mean, I did finally, after many years of putting it off, finally a few months ago watch Sophie's Choice, and you know, she's speaking like 2 different languages in that, and it's pretty good.
Good stuff.
Yeah. That movie is really different from the way I always pictured it. You know how sometimes you hear about a movie, it's really well known, but you haven't seen it, so you sort of make up your own thing. It was quite different from what I was expecting. Not in a bad way. It was just different.
Yeah. It's really not, I mean, it's not a whole lot of, I mean, it stays in one place the majority of the film.
Right.
Like in that apartment. And it's just not, it's just a really small, you know, with the exception of some flashbacks, I guess. But it's, it's not a, I mean, as much as you hear it talked about, it's like not a whole lot going on other than the, you know, drama between the characters.
It's one of the rare movies that I'm aware of where Kevin Kline's like an unlikable guy.
Yeah.
Like usually he's like the guy you're rooting for and you're on his side. And even if he's like sort of like a jerk, like in Old Fish Called Wanda or something like that, you know, but in this, like you see like he's got all this charm, but it's all sort of like covering up like a bunch of like rage and problems and stuff. But it's a good movie. I think part of it was like I didn't realize that like you only found out about her choice at the very end.
Yeah.
Like because it's the one thing you always hear about from the movie, right? Like there's no getting around that Sophie's Choice was about choosing between her kids from some sadistic Nazi. I didn't realize like you were going to see her live her life and then like finally have the revelation that she had this happen to her before. I don't know. I mean, it's not bad storytelling. It's just not what I was expecting.
Right.
I didn't expect them to lead with it either. I don't know what I expected. But it's definitely a good movie. I don't know what I've liked Meryl Streep in lately.
She hasn't done a whole lot lately.
The last thing that really got a lot of people's attention was like more than 10 years ago when she did Doubt, which is a very powerful performance.
She
And
with
Philip Seymour Hoffman.
yeah.
I haven't even seen that in about 10 years. I remember it really well, though. But that's another movie that is like that. It doesn't move around much and is very dialogue focused, but it's very powerful because of the subject matter. And it's a cool movie because it's open-ended, because you don't really know if she was right or if he was right. And that's what's cool. Like, it doesn't definitively say.
Some people don't like that, and yeah.
I think it really works for a movie like that.
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't work everywhere, but it works in plenty of situations. I know what you mean, though. Some people, like, they can't stand that anywhere. They want some sort of definitive answer.
Well, because you don't know who to root for. Like, is he in the, he didn't do anything wrong, so fuck her, or she was right the whole time, he's an asshole.
I guess that's what some people don't grasp about movies. There isn't always somebody to root for.
Right.
Sometimes you're just sort of observing something. And you can find something admirable about either of the characters, but at the same time you think, but maybe she's just destroying his life, or maybe he's just like fucking lying about what he did, You
think he did it?
No. At least that was how I felt when I watched it back then. Maybe I need to watch it again because I could change my mind. But I remember that's how I felt feeling. I was thinking there is some, like, there's a weird thing about, like, one of the black kids. There's, like, what does explain that? There is something really fishy there, but I don't know. But something about him swayed me to make it think that it was some sort of, like, misunderstanding.
Well, I think the current environment of the way priests are viewed, it's you immediately think he did it.
Yeah, because, I mean, so many priests have done it, right?
Right, yeah. And they've covered it up, unfortunately.
And like I said, that's something that really hits close to home. There's been quite a lot of that here in Nova Scotia over the years.
Wow.
A lot of stuff has come out over the years of abuses within the church and stuff like that.
That's terrible.
Yeah, I mean, you'll often hear, well, maybe not often, but when you hear on the news about like sexual abuse and stuff like that, the majority of the stuff I've heard that has happened, say within Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, etc., has had that attached to it. It's been like that kind of abuse. Not saying all of it, obviously there's others too, but the majority that I've heard has been that.
Yeah. I was watching a documentary about...
it's a heavily Catholic population.
Is it?
I'm not, but most Nova Scotians are Catholic.
I was watching a documentary about football, American football recently.
My dad was.
Do what?
I was just saying, my dad. I was raised Protestant from my mother.
Your dad was.
My dad was Catholic, although technically he wasn't Roman Catholic, so he wouldn't have been under the Pope. He would have been Orthodox Catholic because he's Ukrainian. But anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay.
He's still a priest and stuff. But,
right.
But not under the Rome and the Pope.
But anyway, they were playing a team, Penn State. And my wife was like, "Yeah, don't you know those kids are just getting diddled in the back? It's like you can't look at that shit now without thinking that every time you see." Yeah.
Penn State has just become like a punchline almost for it.
Yeah, it was true. It was happening then.
Mm.
You got to take one for the team.
Ooh, yeah.
But that's a good note to end on.
Yeah, but we didn't talk much about the plot of Fire and Ice or the characters. As we said, it's not particularly deep or compelling. But if you want to set up, you just have this evil wizard with his mom pushing from the north, their icy kingdom, pushing glaciers southward. And Necron's not an interesting villain at all either. It's like they didn't put much thought into it because like the mother seems to at least have some sort of like plan of conquest and stuff. Because there's this point where, after the daughter's been kidnapped and she has him, and the king of the southern kingdom says, I guess, now we do have to try to negotiate some sort of peace with him. So he sends his son in a delegation. And of course, so they're saying, okay, we got to work this out. We can be allies or something like that. And he's like, peace? I spit on your peace. And then he uses his magic and kills them all. And there's like a part earlier before that where the mother is encouraging him to like have sex with Tigra so they can like produce an heir and stuff like that. And he's like no interest in that. He's just one of those in it for the evils bad guys. Yeah. He's just like, no, all I want is to beat him. Like his mom seems to have some sort of actual plan of conquest, but he's just like, I hate everybody. no peace. Ah, and so he's not much of a villain. And like, there's not even any logic as to why Dark Wolf beats him, because
Yeah.
when he kills the delegation, we see that his magic is somewhat similar to like telekinesis. Because when they physically try to come at him, he sort of like can just stop them. And then he can actually control them, and he makes them kill each other. And then he finally makes his son, the prince, kill himself. So he can control you. So then in like the climax or whatever, when they have the attack and Lamb is rescuing the girl, Dark Wolf attacks him. And Dark Wolf, he's not anything special. He's just a pretty tough warrior. And for some reason, through sheer force of will, I guess, he just makes his way through it. Like a few times, he's trying to swing his axe at him, and he's like, "Rrr," and he's like stops him. But you can see he's pushing his way through. At one point, he gets really frustrated, the Necron, and he goes, "Why won't you die?" And I'm thinking, well, were you casting some sort of magic that would have killed him? All I saw you doing was stopping him. So I have no idea what's going on there. And then he just sort of powers through it and then hacks him with the axe. It's not particularly satisfying. It's just like he's so badass that he just pushed himself way through the magic. Like, he could have had at least a little bit of imagination there. Like, I don't know, make him drop a chandelier on him, make him do something where he outwits him or something. Instead, he just sort of grits his teeth and pushes through the magic and kills him rather unceremoniously.
He's that much of a badass.
Yeah, I guess.
The only thing I can think of is, in some early drafts of the script, Dark Wolf was his dad. So maybe he's somewhat immune to the power. I don't know.
Yeah, that would have actually been interesting if a Dark Wolf had actually turned out to be that guy's Necron's dad, if you mean, or something like that. Instead, Dark Wolf is reduced to just some wandering guy that presumably came from another kingdom that had been conquered and was just wandering around looking for revenge, and then sort of teams up with Lamb and her, but then just wanders off at the end anyway, which, okay, fine, I guess.
Well, Dark Wolf was like more concerned with killing the mother, I think, than killing.
What happened to her? Did she just get crushed by ice or something? I don't even remember what happened. I mean, the whole place like comes down with lava. She must get killed by like lava, because that's the other thing. Is, the other king releases lava, and it like melts the big ice fortress, I guess. I'm like, why didn't you just do that all along? Why did you send a delegation in there? You sent your son in there to get killed. Although I guess he wouldn't have sent the. I mean, his daughter was being held captive, so I guess he couldn't. But at the same time, does he? I mean, I just watched this, but I can't remember. Does he even know that his daughter got free before he released the? I don't remember him like seeing his daughter and thinking she's safe now. We can release the lava. I think he was just like, "Fuck it, release the lava."
Yeah.
If my daughter dies, she dies, because there's no like scene of her reuniting with her father. We only see her with Lamb. So I don't know. So yeah, there's some logistical problems. I will say that the final attack is maybe one of the best animated sequences of the movie, particularly probably because it can't use rotoscoping because they fly in on the Pteranodon.
Yeah.
I thought that was probably the best animated sequence. They're flying in and they're dodging, and the bad guys are like throwing rocks at them. That actually looked pretty good and fluid, better than the rest of the movie, which often looked herky-jerky and not right. But that was a pretty good sequence, and of course it reminds me of one of the most famous comics from Metal Hurlant, Heavy Metal, which was a comic from 1977. I can't remember the name of the artist now, though I should. It's one Mobius did. And it's a really great comic, and it's set in that kind of world, and it has like characters flying on the backs of Pteranodon type thing. Anyway, it's a really famous comic, and it doesn't have any dialogue at all. It's just all art. It's really good. Part of me thinks that was sort of a tribute to that. But I had to look up the name of that comic now because it's driving me nuts. But it's
Robert Rodriguez bought the rights to Heavy Metal.
So Robert Rodriguez is just into all that stuff. So it's no surprise that he'd want to do a remake of this film. Although, as far as I can tell, that's not going to happen anytime soon.
I was trying to figure out what movie he was going to make with Rose McGowan before he broke up with her. Was going to be headlining a movie. Barbarella, and there was another one he was talking about too. But yeah, he's a guy that seems like he just like invests in a lot of different things and kind of just sees what's going to pan out.
Yeah, he's the one that did Alita: Battle Angel, isn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to see that.
I liked it a lot. It's really silly, of course, but I liked it a lot. But I still wish James Cameron had directed it. I feel like James Cameron's really good at stuff with like a lot of scope, like big epic stuff. I feel like it felt a bit smaller, and I feel like that was because of somebody like Rodriguez. Not that he's bad at that. Anyway, the comic I couldn't think of is called Arzak, or maybe Arzach. Anyway, it's a comic that Mobius did in the 70s for Metal Hurlant, 1975. Anyway, it's one of the most like influential comics ever done, basically. It doesn't have any dialogue in it, but it's basically this warrior, and he's flying through, and he's on like some sort of like pterodactyl pteranodon thing, which I think they must have been like referencing for this movie. They called them like Dragon Hawk or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Something, once again, very generic and not memorable.
Well, they're like pterodactyls or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I automatically recognize some of the artwork from by Mobius.
Yeah. Oh, I love Mobius. We talked about him a little bit on the show. That's definitely one of the giants of sci-fi.
Oh, was he French?
Yep, Jean Girard is his name. He's an amazing French artist who didn't actually start doing sci-fi until the 70s with that. Before that, he'd done other stuff, like he did a long-running series. It was actually a Western called Blueberry about a Confederate soldier guy and stuff. I have some of his work. It's really good. He's an amazing guy. As I said, he's one of those guys that's just had like a huge like ripple effect throughout like movies and stuff like that. And it sort of started with, again, the Jodorowsky's Dune thing, because he was brought on board as a storyboard artist.
Oh, wow.
And as usual, like I said, that was a movie that never happened, but it brought all these people together that would eventually go on to have huge effects. The Geiger guy that did Aliens, all that stuff. They all came together.
That would have been awesome.
I know, for a movie that never happened. But and Mobius was also such a fast artist too. He could just pump out stuff. He was kind of like the European equivalent of Osamu Tezuka, because like he didn't just was like great artist, but he was fast. Like he was super productive. But yeah, I'm trying to collect more of his stuff over time. I have some of this. I actually have a comic that because even though the movie didn't get made, he and Jodorowsky remained friends, and they made some comics together. Including some stuff he would have liked to make movies. I've got Mad Woman of the Sacred Heart, which is a pretty cool, trippy comic. It's not that sci-fi compared to some of the other stuff. It's actually very deeply philosophical. It's cool though. But yeah, I love Mobius. I also have the one superhero comic he did. He did in the mid '80s. He and Stan Lee did a Silver Surfer comic. It was just a standalone 3-part thing called Silver Surfer Parable. It's really nice. It doesn't take place in any continuity, but it's really good. It's probably the last good thing Stan Lee did, I would say. Because Stan Lee never stopped doing stuff all the way up to his death, but none of it was any good. That's okay, because he did some of the most brilliant, amazing stuff in the 60s and some of the 70s. But by the 80s, he was tapped out.
I mean, Stripperella? And there's no love for...
Like, just the other day, I was flipping through channels, and they were like, Stan Lee's, what was it, Something 7 was coming on. He also did something called Lucky Man, like, all this stuff. Like, he just kept putting his name on stuff, and I don't know. It's fine. I'm not going to criticize him. He can do what he wants. He could have done what he wanted, and I feel bad, because, as I said, the last few years of his life, I found out, were not pleasant, and he was subject to elder abuse and people using him, which just really makes me sad.
Oh, no, that's terrible.
It just really pisses me off, and that's why I was extra sensitive to stupid Bill Maher mouthing off about him after he died. Which is just classless and ignorant. But yeah, Mobius is amazing. You probably remember, like, a couple years ago, I said, like, I really wanted to get into European comics because I didn't know as much. Like, Mobius was sort of my jumping off point. Like, I knew Mobius, and then I wanted to get into more stuff. So, yeah, a really great artist. Mobius was also, like, again, such a giant, like, he touched on my people. He was personal friends with Hayao Miyazaki. And Mobius's daughter is named Nausicaa. He named her after Miyazaki's manga and then movie, Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind.
Wow.
So that's always a fun thing to find out, too. Like, when you have, like, somebody you really admire, and then you find out they were, like, friends with somebody else you really liked. You're like, oh, that's so perfect. That's cool. So that'll do it for Fire and Ice. As we said, it's not particularly compelling or great, but it's worth a watch. It's only 80 minutes and won't kill you. Especially if you want to see some something that was indicative of the fantasy of that period, like Conan and stuff like that. It's unfortunate that seems to be the only thing where like Frank Frazada's designs were directly used for a movie. It would have been nice to have seen like a something with a budget take up Frank Frazada stuff. And as we said, that's kind of the recurring theme throughout Bakshi's career is that he never quite had the budget and the freedom to do this and the resources that he should have had. Because I do think Bakshi is still a really great talent and an important guy in animation for all the contributions that I already named. And I'll always have sort of a love-hate relationship with most of his movies. Often I think there's some really good ideas and concepts in there, not always executed the best way. And again, sometimes that's his fault, sometimes it's not. I don't know what the hell he was thinking for the Lord of the Rings because those character designs make me want to cry. And I'm going to watch that soon, just for the hell of it. But still, I would say his movies are always interesting and worth watching. And I think maybe we'll do Cool World somewhere down the line, which is a little bit different because it's also partially live action. But that was an idea he had since the late '80s, and it was a much deeper, more interesting thing than what happened to that movie, which was once again a really strong example of executive meddling, where the powers that be really came in and changed a bunch of stuff against his wishes. So maybe somewhere down the line we'll do that movie because I think it would be an interesting show for sure. So yeah, as we said, we're just doing some lighter, easier stuff for the next little while. We don't have anything specific planned, but we have bounced around a few titles, so we have a few things that we're thinking of. I know there are a couple like Dustin Hoffman movies we'd like to do. I've had trouble finding any, but we'll see how that goes. What's funny is on TMC tonight, or TCM, they're showing Tootsie,
Huh.
which has always been a fun movie,
Yeah. Before its time.
for its time. I know. Nowadays, it wouldn't be woke enough, I guess. Like it was woke for its time, but it wouldn't be woke enough for now.
Yeah.
But
That is true.
But yeah, so we have a few movies in mind, so we'll figure out what we'll be doing going forward. And as I said, hopefully after having such a long break, we'll be able to get some consistency and get a few shows in a row here. I don't really have anything that should be keeping me from that. You never know what's going to happen. Things come up, but we will do our best to crank out some shows because it's not like we don't want to do them. And yeah, I'm going to get talking to you guys again and hearing what you have to say about anything we've talked about, whether it's the movie in question or one of our rants and rambles about completely unrelated things. We're always interested to know what you guys are thinking too. So please share. So that's going to do for tonight. Thanks a lot for watching. That's Jay. I'm Cole. That was Fire and Ice, 1983 by Ralph Bakshi. And we're not sure what's next, but we'll announce it when we know. Thanks a lot, guys. See ya.
Thanks.